Chapter 3890. After the unexpected evolution last time, the current netherworld furnace had already begun to develop an artifact spirit. From the fact that it could temporarily remove the rune chains on the furnace walls, it was likely that after returning to the depths of the source of all evil, it would also be able to remove the temporarily removed chains on its own accord. Once again, it would connect to the furnace walls. Therefore, it was definitely not easy to prevent the netherworld furnace from transporting the condensed all-evil origin liquid through those rune chains. Merely breaking those rune chains would probably not have any effect at all. Perhaps after exhausting all his effort and energy, the other party would be able to easily reconnect the chains. If that was really the case, Yi Xian would probably go crazy. The best method was to completely destroy those rune chains. Of course, they could only destroy half of the rune chains used to transport the product of the netherworld furnace, the all-evil origin liquid. As for the other half, the rune chains used to transport the raw materials of flesh and blood into the netherworld furnace that had been locked onto by the Eye of the Heavens Tao and constructed a stable passageway had to be kept. Yi Xian only wanted to prevent the condensed all-evil origin liquid from being transported out, not prevent the raw materials of flesh and blood used to condense the all-evil origin liquid from being transported in. As long as the product of the netherworld furnace could not be transported out, all the all-evil origin liquid it had condensed would be stored inside the netherworld furnace. When the time was right, the headless infant corpse would activate the secret material he had added to Yi Xian's soul blood and snatch the netherworld furnace. After being refined by Yi Xian, it would be stored in the netherworld. All the all-evil origin liquid in the netherworld furnace would then fall into Yi Xian's pocket. Just the thought of it was enough to make one extremely excited. However, it was obviously impossible for Yi Xian to destroy all the rune chains that transported the all-evil origin liquid out by himself. He did not have the strength to do so. Even if he did, he would not be able to do it himself. The netherworld furnace had already returned to the source of all evil star domain. There was even a high possibility that a wisp of the Eye of the Heavens Tao's consciousness was lurking in the dark, spying on them. The moment Yi Xian appeared, it was tantamount to exposing himself, and he would be locked onto by the Eye of the Heavens Tao from then on. This matter could only be done by someone else. To put it bluntly, it was killing with a borrowed knife. Yi Xian frowned and pondered for a while. Soon, he had a general idea and grinned, putting the matter of the netherworld furnace to the back of his mind for the time being. Yi Xian took out the flesh and blood of a creature of the desolation level from the cave at the bottom of the volcano in the central region of the Shinong cauldron. Furthermore, he directly guided a wisp of Shinong's four-colored flames over it and began to refine it according to the method of refining the flesh medicine that he had deduced previously. Sure enough, the headless corpse didn't react this time. Even though they had seen the Wasteland Inheritance Tower fly across the void above the battlefield during the Battle of the Wastelands, they were not qualified or powerful enough to insert a strand of their spiritual sense into the tower. Therefore, in the eyes of the headless infant corpses, their remains were worthless. Of course, it was different for Yi Xian. It was also a top-grade flesh and blood resource. Now, he was using the Shinong's four-colored flames to refine the remains of a creature of the desolation level. This was only the first step. According to the result of Yi Xian's devouring systems deduction, if he wanted to use this method to refine the level 16 liquid, he would have to add all kinds of heavenly treasures, minerals, and other resources after the first step of refining, but that was the follow-up step. Yi Xian hadn't even mastered the first step of refining, so he naturally wouldn't waste resources. After all kinds of heavenly treasures that could be used to refine the level 16 liquid were extremely rare. Even Yi Xian didn't have many of them. As the Shinong four-colored flame burned, the feathers of this quasi-desolate era creature quickly fell off. Its flesh was roasted to a golden color, and its fat seeped out. It also emitted an exotic fragrance that penetrated one's heart. It was a 9-headed bird that was 90,000 meters long. However, after being roasted by the Shinong's four-colored flames, its body had been reduced to only 60,000 meters long. If it had only been roasted, he would have been able to feast on it. After all, it was the remains of a great being of the desolation level. Even though it had been dead for a long time, the remaining energy in its flesh and blood was still astonishing. Even Yi Xian, who often roasted such flesh and blood, had never eaten it before. He had never tasted such a delicacy. He had only ever roasted the remains of Star Lords and Sector Lords before, and he had only ever roasted the flesh of a quasi-primordial expert, which was the purple gold void rat he had obtained from the space rat's ancestral land. Yi Xian had once cut off a large chunk of the rat's flesh and roasted it. Now, as the nine-headed bird was completely roasted to a golden yellow by the Shenong four-colored flames, an alluring fragrance permeated through the cauldron and spread throughout his body. The saliva in Yi Xian's mouth couldn't help but stir as his mouth was filled with saliva. However, he managed to suppress the urge, because his purpose this time wasn't to roast the meat, but to refine the flesh and blood medicine. If one wanted to use this method to refine level 16 or even higher gene cultivation fluid, the first step was to refine the prepared blood and flesh to the point where it had completely turned into a blood and flesh pulp. Although the nine-headed bird's remains had been completely roasted, it was still far from being completely transformed into a blood and flesh pulp. He could eat it if he only wanted to wrap his stomach, but he had only just begun to refine the flesh and blood medicine. After forcefully suppressing the strong appetite in his heart, Yi Xian adjusted his state of mind. His originally restless state of mind quickly calmed down. He then took a deep breath and increased the input of the Shenong's four-colored flames. He also tried to control them in the slightest. This process was extremely crucial, and the slightest bit of carelessness would result in failure. Either the precious nine-headed bird's flesh would be directly burnt to a crisp, or the entire precious body would not be able to completely melt down the precious blood, precious flesh, and precious elixir. Time passed slowly. Yi Xian focused on controlling the Shenong's four-colored flames and refining the nine-headed bird's flesh and blood. Gradually, the body, which had been reduced to only 6,000 meters due to the power of the Shenong's four-colored flames, began to shrink again. 5,500 meters. 5,000 meters. During this process, the dense fragrance that was being emitted from the nine-headed bird's flesh and blood treasure that was becoming smaller and smaller became even more intense. Chapter 3891. The reason why Yi Xian was hiding in the heart of the central domain volcano was to guard against these native beasts who had long since turned into gluttons. Over this period of time, millions of native vicious beasts had been gathering at the edge of the central domain volcano, queuing up to roast meat. It was only in the last 2 days that the magnificent sight of millions of vicious beasts queuing up to roast meat at the edge of the central domain volcano had gradually disappeared due to the nearly depletion of their stock of meat. Although there were all sorts of spirit birds and spirit beasts in the mountains within the farmer god cauldron, on the one hand, they were raised by Yi Xian to be used for alchemy in the future. They weren't spoils of war stored in the hands of the native vicious beasts, so it wasn't easy to harm them. On the other hand, because these spirit birds and spirit beasts hadn't matured yet, the energy in their flesh wasn't dense. Even if they were roasted with a strange flame like the farmer god's four-colored flames, it would only satisfy their appetite at most. It wouldn't have much effect on the evolution of the body or life form. Therefore, these spirit birds and spirit beasts in the mountains within the farmer god cauldron had escaped this calamity. Although they had only been out of food for 2 short days, these 2 days felt like years to these gluttons who had long since become picky with their food. If it wasn't for the fact that they had no idea that Yi Xian still had large amounts of top-grade meat stored in the various sealed caves at the bottom of the central domain volcano, they had probably set their sights on that place for a long time. Moreover, it was very likely that the 2 ferocious beast emperors, the primordial porcupine and the primordial turtle, were leading the theft. Just like Xianyuan Ziying and the other 2 girls who had wreaked havoc in the cauldron space back then. Of course, these sealed caves at the bottom of the central domain volcano had long been reinforced by Yi Xian, and had even used the power of the farmer god cauldron to set up layers upon layers of restrictions. Even if the 2 domain lords, the immemorial porcupine and the immemorial tortoise, were to take the lead, there was basically no chance of success. Once bitten, twice shy. Yi Xian had already been harmed by the 3 purplish warbler girls once, so he naturally wouldn't make the same mistake twice. However, he still underestimated this group of foodies. After 2 days of desolation, this group of people were already so hungry that their eyes were glowing. At this moment, although Yi Xian was hiding in the center of the central region's volcano and refining his hands, the 9-headed bird's flesh and blood was being roasted, and the fragrance that was being continuously refined spread out through the vast volcano's crater. The entire cauldron's vast space had long been filled with fragrance. Millions of people. When the foodie smelled it, he immediately became spirited. It was as if they had been injected with chicken blood. Without exception, they all swarmed over, roar. It smells so good. This pig dares to bet that this time, what is being roasted is definitely the flesh and blood of a universe-level existence. Who did it? I'm very angry, and the consequences are very serious. That's right. That's right. The aroma seems to be coming from the bottom of the volcano. Pull it out. Pull out the guy who is eating the barbecued meat alone. God damn it. He picked up a piece of the universe-level flesh treasure and didn't give it to Master Pig and Master Tortoise. He's such a jerk. Oh woo! Millions of indigenous ferocious beasts all rushed out from the surrounding mountains and gathered around the crater of the central region's volcano. They crouched down and peered into the depths of the volcano's crater. This scene was truly strange and inexplicable, causing Yi Xian's entire body to tremble. He was originally concentrating on refining the corpse of the quasi-desolate ancient nine-headed bird that was floating in front of him. He was careful and had already refined it to a size of around 3,000 feet. Although it still hadn't reached the level of treasure blood, treasure flesh, and treasure pulp, at least 6,000 feet, had shrunk by half. The initial refinement was half complete. Unfortunately, all of this was in vain. As his originally focused mind was disturbed, Yi Xian was slightly distracted. The Shenong four-colored flames, which were originally under close control, instantly became unstable. Although he instantly became alert, it was already too late. In less than half an instant, the nine-headed bird's flesh and blood that had shrunk to around 3,000 feet due to the refinement had shrunk to around 10,000 feet. In the blink of an eye, about 1/10 of the treasure body had been roasted black. It's burnt, hurry up and turn off the fire, Ayaya, it's already cooked. Why are you still in a daze? Hurry up and turn off the fire. Bring that big guy up. This turtle has been hungry for several days. Awoo. It smells so good. If you don't come up, this pig will jump down. Before Yi Xian could recover from his shock, the howls of the immemorial porcupine and the immemorial tortoise came from the northern edge of the central region's volcano. Seeing that Yi Xian had roasted a large hunk of treasure meat that was about 3,000 feet long into charcoal, these two fellows were even more anxious than him. At this moment, they were jumping around at the northern edge of the central region's volcano. If it weren't for the large amount of Shenong four-colored flames floating in the belly of the volcano, and they were extremely dense, they would have already brazenly jumped down. They would have jumped down. In addition to the immemorial porcupine and the immemorial tortoise, there were also dozens of Star-Lord old monsters and more than 100 universe-realm indigenous fierce beasts behind them. This group of fellows did not dare to clamor at Yi Xian, but all of their eyes were shining with green light, and the corners of their mouths were dripping with saliva. They stared eagerly at the interior of the volcano below, and from time to time, there would be faint slurping sounds, F***CK. This young master is being targeted by a thief. Staring blankly at the nine-headed bird's flesh and blood treasure body that was suspended in front of him, because 1/10 of it had been roasted, Yi Xian simply wanted to cry but had no tears. Fortunately, this was only his first time refining. To be able to successfully refine the 6,000-meter-long nine-headed bird's flesh and blood treasure body to a mere 3,000-meter-long size, completing half of the initial refinement process. This progress had already exceeded Yi Xian's original expectations. Therefore, although this first refinement failed in the end, Yi Xian was not too disappointed. At least, although the nine-headed bird's flesh and blood treasure body was precious, Yi Xian still had more than 200 similar flesh and blood treasures of desolate-era creatures of the immortal realm and above that he could refine. Only losing one was not a big deal at all. Moreover, although the nine-headed bird's flesh and blood treasure body was ruined, nearly 90% of it was still golden and shiny, and could be said to be fragrant. Eating it as a meal would not only satisfy the appetite of the mouth, but also promote the evolution of the body. It was not a waste at all. Thinking of this, Yi Xian's mood improved again. With a thought, this 3,000-meter-long nine-headed bird's flesh and blood treasure body shot toward the mouth of the volcano above his head. He decided to continue refining. As for the ruined flesh and blood treasure body, he would just throw it out to the group of foodies and treat it as a reward for the whole army. Woo. Faster, faster, faster. Chapter 3892. Woo. Hurry up. Hurry up. Hurry up. Roar. I can't hold it in any longer. It smells so good. It really smells so good. Seeing Yi Xian, who was at the bottom of the volcano, wave his hand and instantly throw over the pile of flesh and blood that emitted a rich fragrance and a shiny golden color. The large group of foodies, who were lying around the crater and looking down, immediately burst into an uproar. They seemed as if they'd gone mad as they howled incessantly. It was truly too noisy. Yi Xian frowned because if this continued, then he wouldn't be able to concentrate on refining at all. Right when he was about to reprimand them, the clamorous mouth of the volcano had suddenly become deathly silent. When he raised his head to look over, all the native ferocious beasts were nowhere to be seen. The area around the mouth of the volcano in the central region was too terrifying. A few million native ferocious beasts were lying at the edge of the volcano and sticking their heads out to look down, yet they hadn't covered the entire area. Yet now, not a single one could be seen. Along with the enormous nine-headed bird's flesh being carried away by the primeval porcupine and primeval turtle, the entire group of foodies actually swarmed over and left even faster than they'd arrived. In the blink of an eye, not a single beast could be seen. The nine-headed bird's flesh was still around 10 kilometers in size. Moreover, it was the corpse of an almighty figure from the quasi-primordial era, so its flesh and blood already contained formidable energy. After it was roasted by the four-colored flames of Shenong and refined by Yi Xian, the energy contained within the flesh and blood had become even denser. The amount was even denser. Even the primeval porcupine and primeval turtle at the region Lord Realm couldn't open their bellies and eat to their heart's content like those treasured flesh and blood from before. So, even though it was only 10 kilometers in size, there were absolutely no small number of native ferocious beasts that could be eaten. Besides the primeval porcupine and primeval turtle, the few dozen Star Lord Realm old monsters and over 100 Universe Realm native ferocious beasts should have a share. As for the other native ferocious beasts below the Universe Realm, even if they didn't have the fortune to eat the meat, they could still watch from the side and smell the fragrance. Perhaps when he licked the bones in the end, he would be able to hook out one or two pieces of precious flesh from the crevices of the bones. In short, as the nine-headed bird's oily, fragrant flesh was taken away, all the millions of ferocious beasts that had swarmed over, without exception, all left. Yi Xian let out a long sigh of relief. Finally, it was quiet again, and he could continue to boil the precious body. It was time to practice. After adjusting his mood again, Yi Xian took out the second treasure body of a creature from the Desolation era from the cave at the bottom of the volcano in the central region. It was also at the level of a mighty figure from the quasi-desolation era. This time, he had chosen a one-horned howling sky tiger. Its entire body was as white as jade, and it glittered like a treasure. Although it had been dead for a long time, the energy in its body had not dissipated, and the golden tiger blood had not dried up. It could be clearly seen from the wound on its right hind limb. Huff, with a wave of his hand, the Shenong four-colored flames that had just been withdrawn flared up again, and directly wrapped up the one-horned howling sky tiger's body. A new round of roasting and refining began. The one-horned howling sky tiger's fur was quickly refined, revealing its golden skin. Gradually, it was roasted to maturity, and its fat was dripping with a divine aura. It was full of energy. When the one-horned howling sky tiger's body was completely cooked, it was only about 70,000 feet. Everything else was discarded as dregs. However, this was still only the beginning. Yi Xian took a deep breath, calmed himself down, and continued. According to the steps of refining the great flesh medicine, he carried out the initial condensation. The goal was to completely refine the 70,000 feet huge body. When he finally reached the level of treasure blood, treasure flesh, and treasure serum, he would be able to reach it. He estimated that there would only be a small amount of treasure serum in his hand. 60,000 feet. 50,000 feet. Until the final 2,000 feet, this time, Yi Xian had gone even further than when he was refining the nine-headed bird's flesh and blood. In the end, the single-horned howling sky tiger was only around 2,600 to 2,700 meters tall, but something unexpected happened at this moment. The Shinong four-colored flames that had been carefully controlled shook slightly, and the originally delicate control was broken. The temperature suddenly soared, and the entire right hind limb that had shrunk by many times was roasted to a crisp. All his efforts were in vain. However, Yi Xian's self-confidence was even stronger. He had a strong feeling that the third refinement was bound to succeed. If the first and second refinements were only for practice, then after these two refinements, Yi Xian more or less grasped a few tricks. For the third time, he was confident that he could completely refine the treasure body of a quasi-desolate era to the level of treasure blood, treasure serum, and treasure serum. Whoosh! With a sound of breaking air, the one-horned howling sky tiger's treasure body that had been destroyed was directly thrown out of the volcano above by Yi Xian like a piece of trash. It was not that he was not greedy, but after all, this was the treasure blood and treasure flesh of a quasi-desolate era expert. The essence of the flesh was too rich. It had a strong nourishing effect on the physical body. However, Yi Xian didn't have the time to care about the Taotai feast right now. After refining his hands twice in a row, he had gained quite a bit of insight. Right now, it was the best time to finish refining the initial stage of flesh and blood in one go. Striking while the iron is hot meant this. Awoo! Awoo! As the flesh and blood of the single-horned howling sky tiger was thrown up, a little distance away from the mouth of the volcano in the central region above his head, the roar of the fierce beast sounded again, revealing madness and incomparable joy. Obviously, the group of foodies outside had found the one-horned howling sky tiger that had been thrown out. If the previous nine-headed bird was only enough for the hundreds of indigenous ferocious beasts of the universe level and above to eat, then, with the addition of the one-horned howling sky tiger's treasure body, the entire indigenous ferocious beasts race would be able to share a piece of the pie. Yi Xian didn't pay attention to all of this. After throwing out the horned howling sky tiger's flesh and blood treasure, he immediately took out a third set of flesh and blood treasure that was waiting to be refined. This time, it was a cyan and red bird that looked like a phoenix, so it should belong to the Yuan and Feng category. Yi Xian didn't pay attention to all of this. After throwing out the horned howling sky tiger's flesh and blood treasure, he immediately took out a third set of flesh and blood treasure that was waiting to be refined. This time, it was a cyan and red bird that looked like a phoenix. It should belong to the Yuan and Feng category. Yu Muzi's chi was very strong, but unfortunately, it had fallen in the end. Huff. Chapter 3893. This Yuan Phoenix's flesh and blood precious body wasn't that large. It didn't reach 100,000 zhang in size, only around 3,000 zhang in size. When all of the feathers fell off and the entire flesh and blood precious body was cooked, it was only 2,000 zhang in size. Yi Xian controlled the Shinong four-colored flames to refine it. In just 10 minutes, the Yuan Feng's flesh and blood had shrunk by half again. It was only around 3,000 zhang in size. This meant that half of the deep refinement process was already completed. Yi Xian was not as excited as the previous two times. His mind was still as calm as an ancient well without ripples. The Shinong four-colored flames were like the most precise scalpel in his hand. Inch by inch, the flames merged into the Yuan Feng's flesh and blood cells and began the refinement process. Time passed slowly. In the blink of an eye, 2 hours had passed. Previously, he only used 10 minutes to shrink the Yuan Feng's body to 3,000 zhang in size. Now, 2 hours had passed and the original 3,000 zhang had shrunk to 300 zhang in size. Although it seemed that the last 2 hours had only shrunk the Yuan Feng's body to 9,000 zhang in size, in reality, the refinement process was slowing down. As long as there were no mistakes, the refinement process this time should be successful. Yi Xian suppressed the joy in his heart and continued to refine the Yuan Feng's flesh and blood. The Shinong four-colored flames that wrapped around the Yuan Feng's flesh and blood were always in a stable and fine state. They never wavered or changed. Half a day later, the Luan Feng's flesh and blood had shrunk to 3 zhang in size. Under Yi Xian's continuous refinement, the Luan Feng's flesh and blood had shrunk to 3 zhang in size. It was 1,000 times smaller. This was absolutely terrifying. It was unknown how much impurities and energy had been burned away by Yi Xian's Shenong four-colored flames. The remaining mixture was the essence of the Luan Feng's flesh and blood. It was the essence. However, this was not the end. The Luan Phoenix, which was only about 3 feet in diameter, still maintained its original form. After all, it was a powerful existence at the quasi-desolation level. Even if it was roasted by the Shenong four-colored flames, its body still shrank as a whole. The order in its body, the chains, were still stable and did not collapse, causing the Luan Feng's body to change shape and lose its majesty. As for Yi Xian's final goal, it was to completely refine it. The appearance of the Luan Phoenix bird could no longer exist, and all of the precious blood and flesh could no longer exist. It had to be fused into one and turned into a slurry-like existence. That was the purest form of essence energy, the basic medicinal slurry of flesh and blood medicine. The refinement process continued. But Yi Xian. If in the end, the Luan Phoenix still maintained its original appearance and its flesh couldn't be turned into medicinal paste, then this refinement was clearly a failure. Moreover, this kind of failure was not because there was a problem with Yi Xian's refinement process. If that was the case, the Luan Feng's body would not continue to shrink. However, its form did not change at all. The only reason why its flesh and blood could not be turned into medicinal paste was because it was used for refinement. The level of the flames was not high enough to melt the chains of order in the Luan Feng's flesh and blood. It could break them and fuse them together. If that was the case, then it would be a serious problem. No matter how hard Yi Xian tried, it would be useless. He could only wait until the Shenong exotic flames grew into a 5-colored flame and its power increased again. Only then would he be able to break this deadlock. However, the growth of the Shenong exotic flames was not fixed. Although it had grown 3 times, from the initial 1-colored flame to the current 4-colored flame, all in all, these 3 times could only be considered coincidences. There was no fixed pattern to be found. Who knew when it would be able to increase the level of the flames again and grow into a 5-colored flame? Thinking of this, Yi Xian could not help but feel anxious. However, he quickly regained his senses. No matter what, this Luan Feng's flesh and blood had shrunk to about 3 meters in size. He had to endure this refinement to the end. Even if he did not succeed, at least it would prove that the 4-colored flame was not powerful enough. Otherwise, if he made a mistake midway, even if it was just to verify this point, he was afraid that he would have to undergo another round of refinement. Yi Xian forcefully calmed his slightly impetuous state of mind and continued to refine it with rapt attention. Another half a day passed, and the Luan Phoenix, which had shrunk to a diameter of around 3 meters, shrank once again. When it shrank to a diameter of only a meter, the pleasant surprise came. Walala! A series of faint crisp sounds came from the Shenong 4-colored flame that was suspended in front of Yi Xian. From the beginning to the end, the Luan Feng's body, which had maintained its original appearance, finally melted. From this moment on, its bird form could no longer be seen. These faint sounds, which were as dense as raindrops, were the sound of the chains of order in every inch of his body being completely torn apart. At this time, the Luan Feng's body had turned into a round ball that emitted a green-red light. The round ball that appeared in the form of a slurry had shrunk from a meter in diameter to a foot in size. It was as if the chains of order in its flesh and blood had completely collapsed. The moment its body disappeared, a miniature black hole appeared in this green-red slurry ball, as if it was completely collapsing. At this point, the refinement was finally completed. The Luan Feng's body that was 3,000 meters in size had been refined into a green-red slurry ball that was only a foot in diameter. From this, it could be seen how terrifying the energy contained in this orb of liquid was. And this was only the first step in refining the flesh and blood medicine. What Yi Xian had obtained was only a semi-finished product, and could not be considered a real flesh and blood medicine. The real flesh and blood medicine would use this flesh and blood medicine as the foundation, and then add in all sorts of rare heavenly materials and earthly treasures, and mix them again and again before finally obtaining them. This process still required Yi Xian to explore and deduce. After all, no one had ever concocted a level 16 liquid before, so Yi Xian still had a lot of effort to do. Swish! Swish! With a thought, this ball of flesh and blood medicinal paste that was about a foot in diameter and emitted a dazzling splendor was easily divided into 100 portions by Yi Xian's divine farmer's 4-colored flames. It floated in the air in front of him, causing him to be dazzled. After casually dispelling the Shenong 4-colored flame, Yi Xian took out 100 small storage boxes made of jade essence crystals from his undying world. Then, with a wave of his hand, these 100 egg-sized portions of green-red flesh and blood medicine were stored in a jade essence crystal box. Finally, Yi Xian waved his hand and kept these 100 jade essence crystal boxes in his undying world. Chapter 3894. The basic slurry for the preparation of the flesh medicine had finally been refined. It was safe to say that the preparation of the flesh medicine was halfway done. What Yi Xian needed to do next was to add the rare heavenly materials and earthly treasures that were required for the derivation of the level 16 liquid, using the red and green flesh medicine as the basic solution. He would have to fumble again and again to finally produce a stable level 16 liquid. Obviously, the process couldn't be completed in one go. There was no previous experience that he could use as a reference. Also, the all-evil origin fluid had a domineering additional effect that guaranteed success during the preparation of the level 15 liquid. Even if the formula wasn't complete, it could still make up for the deficiencies and make the gene liquid successful. But that was only a situation that would occur before the 16th level of liquid. The level 16 liquid could allow a star state expert at the peak of the 9th rank to become a star lord, which was absolutely unbelievable. How many star state experts had been stuck at that step since ancient times, unable to make a breakthrough? Therefore, even though the all-evil origin fluid was a top-grade resource, when one reached the 16th grade, when the formula was incomplete and imperfect, adding the all-evil origin fluid would still make up for the flaws in the formula and guarantee the success rate, but the degree of this effect would definitely be greatly weakened. Too much. Judging from that point of view, even though Yi Xian had successfully obtained the basic slurry for the preparation of the flesh medicine, there was still a long way to go before he could really produce the level 16 liquid. However, 100 portions of the flesh medicine meant 100 mixing chances. Yi Xian was confident that he could produce the level 16 liquid. He could have started right away, but after some consideration, Yi Xian gave up the idea in the end. It made sense to strike while the iron was hot, but he had to know when to stop. Just a moment ago, Yi Xian had tried to refine the flesh and blood medicine 3 times in a row, especially the last time when he finally succeeded. Yi Xian's mind was highly concentrated, and it was continuous. In just half a day, he'd already expended too much mental and physical effort. At this moment, he continued with the second half of the deduction and allocation. It wasn't the best time. After adjusting his state of mind, Yi Xian's figure shot up and directly charged out of the central region's volcano. He arrived outside the volcano's crater and landed on the edge of a plain not far from the crater. As far as his eyes could see, the vast plain ahead was densely packed with ferocious local beasts. There was a small portion of them, about a few 100,000 or so, that was as if they were drunk and were sleeping soundly on the ground. As for the other millions of native beasts, they were gathered around, looking at the few of their companions who were sleeping soundly. Their faces were full of envy, and some of them were still drooling. In another direction, the skeletons of the 9-headed bird and the 1-horned sky-howling tiger were being licked by some of the native beasts. The skeletons were already clean and fleshless, but these beasts were still enjoying it. There was even a queue behind them. It seemed that every batch of beasts could only lick the skeletons for a while before they were done. This scene made Yi Xian's hair stand on end. If this continued, would the ferocious beasts in the back be licking the 2 skeletons or the saliva of the guys in the front? He didn't dare to think about this question further. It was too scary. His back was cold, and his scalp was numb. Sure enough, they were a group of foodies. Their tastes were extraordinarily heavy. Brat, I'm going to cultivate in seclusion. Yes, so am I. I've eaten a little too much this time. I have a feeling that I'm about to break through, and it's a breakthrough of a major realm. It's never happened before. While he was in a daze, the primordial porcupine and primordial hairy tortoise's voices sounded. They were obviously abnormal. Yi Xian turned around and found that the two guys were red and swaying as they walked, just like the hundreds of thousands of local ferocious beasts who had fallen asleep on the ground. It was as if they had drunk too much. Yes, I feel like I'm drunk. It wasn't just them, all the Star Lord realm experts and over 100 local ferocious beasts were the same. Some of them were unable to persist any longer and had fallen asleep just like the other low-level ferocious beasts. Even though it seemed like they'd drunk too much, there was an extremely dense aura of energy surging within their bodies. Especially the primordial porcupine, the tortoise, and those Star Lord realm experts. The energy within their bodies was surging too violently, and they were on the verge of being unable to hold it in any longer. They were sleeping. The pores throughout their bodies were emanating the glow of treasures, and it seemed like they were ascending into immortality. This was clearly because they'd eaten a huge amount of flesh and blood from the nine-headed bird and unicorn skyhowl tiger. Those were supreme existences at the quasi-primordial age. Even if it was the region lord realm experts like the porcupine and tortoise, it was no different from immortal pills and miraculous medicines. Even they couldn't eat too much of it. But even then, they were slightly unable to hold on any longer. Their cultivations were about to break through. They were about to break through. Eating meat to the point of getting drunk, this was probably something that no one else could do other than this group of foodies. Yi Xian rolled his eyes, but his heart was filled with joy. The primeval porcupine and primeval hairy tortoise were both at the advanced stage of the region lord realm, and they'd been roasting treasured blood and flesh with the Shinong four-colored flames in the farmer god cauldron recently. So, the accumulation of treasured blood and flesh within their bodies was almost complete. Now that they'd eaten the flesh of numerous quasi-primordial experts, it was equivalent to being injected with treasured blood and flesh. A strong medicine. Under such circumstances, their breakthrough in cultivation had finally arrived. If nothing unexpected occurred, then both the primeval porcupine and primeval turtle would advance a step further after this period of closed-door cultivation. They would advance from the region lord realm into the world lord realm, and they'd become two formidable old geezers at the world lord realm. If that was the case, then Yi Xian would finally have two old geezers at the world lord realm under his command, which would definitely be of great significance and boost his confidence. In addition, the dozens of native Star Lord beasts had obviously eaten a lot of quasi-primordial experts' blood and flesh. Those guys were about to enter seclusion, and some of them would definitely break through the barrier of a major level. After all, some of the native beasts were already at the World Lord realm. They were already in the advanced phase of the Star Lord state. Even if only a third of them made the breakthrough, there would be a dozen new region lords under Yi Xian's command by then. Apart from them, there were also the hundreds of native universe lords. Some of them would be able to advance to the Star Lord state. Further down, there were hundreds of thousands of native beasts below the universe state. Some of them might be able to become universe lords. Chapter 3895. As the primordial porcupine and primordial hairy tortoise led a group of high-level indigenous vicious beasts into collective seclusion, Yi Xian also felt bored in the farmer god cauldron. After throwing some cultivation resources to the 8 great Vajras, he went to the mountain wall cage at the bottom of the volcano in the central region to look at Lion Wan, who had already become his servant. Jean. This guy was still sleeping, but his condition was much better. There was a faint aura of energy fluctuations in his body. It seemed that it was very likely that he had recovered some of his strength. However, his Tao foundation had already been seized. Even if he recovered, he could forget about returning to his previous peak state. Even if there was hope, everything would have to start all over again. Afterwards, Yi Xian soared into the sky and rushed out from the mouth of the Shinong cauldron that was filled with 9-colored fog. His figure appeared outside the black hole of life. Calculating the time, it had been nearly 3 days since Yi Xian left the netherworld cauldron and returned to the black hole of life to begin seclusion. The harvest of these 3 days could not be said to be small. It was simply shocking. Not only did he recultivate the ancient cave void tactics, synchronizing his cultivation method with his physical body's blood-chi realm, but it also led his physical body's blood-chi realm to increase by 2 small levels. Now, his cultivation method of the ancient cave void tactics and his physical body's blood-chi realm had both reached the cosmic 7th order. With another 2 small breakthroughs, he would be able to use the level 15 liquid and advance to the level 15 realm in one fell swoop, becoming a true almighty figure of the universe. In addition, the basic medicinal paste needed to concoct the level 16 liquid had also been successfully refined this time. The level 16 liquid had been lingering in Yi Xian's heart for a long time, causing him to be unable to let go of it. But now that half of the problem had been solved, Yi Xian felt much more relaxed. Finally, the 2 vicious beast emperors, led by the primordial porcupine and primordial hairy tortoise, had also obtained a lot of good fortune this time and began seclusion one after another. It was believed that once they finished their seclusion, the overall strength of the entire indigenous vicious beast tribe would definitely leap to a whole new level. This was the true strength that Yi Xian had in his hands, just like Triumph City. It was absolutely significant to him. Yi Xian was already overjoyed, but what excited him the most was that the headless corpse had secretly tampered with the netherworld cauldron. Yi Xian felt like he was floating in the air when he thought about how the precious ancient treasure that was on the same level as the Shenong cauldron would soon belong to him. Apart from the netherworld furnace, the products inside the netherworld furnace, which means every drop of all evil origin elixir in the future, will be mine. No one can take it away from me, alright. The netherworld cauldron and the farmer god cauldron are ancient artifacts of the same level. There's basically no chance that the evil origin liquid stored in the netherworld cauldron will be forcefully taken away. As he muttered to himself, a wisp of bright light flashed through Yi Xian's eyes, and he seemed to be lost in thought. However, we must be on guard against those high-end forces of the enemy that are crying piteously for food. No matter what, we must sever the channel through which the netherworld furnace supplies evil origin elixir to them. Those rune chains must be destroyed. With that in mind, Yi Xian didn't stay any longer. He waved his hand and stored the farmer god cauldron into his undying world. Then, he waved his hand and summoned the void-shattering shuttle. He stepped into it, activated the concealment array, and shot out, charging out of the black hole of life in the blink of an eye. After the previous refinement, the void-shattering shuttle was now a true starry sky treasure. Its speed was so fast that it was shocking. Even a large fortress with a diameter of 100,000 meters couldn't compare to it. Even Domain Lord Old Monsters couldn't compete with the void-shattering shuttle in terms of speed when traversing the void with their physical bodies. Even Sector Lord Old Monsters had the qualifications to compete with the void-shattering shuttle in terms of speed. The black hole of life wasn't far from the Demon Domain Pass. Yi Xian activated the void-shattering shuttle and traveled at extreme speed. Soon, he plunged into the Demon Domain and headed straight for the Demon Emperor planet. This time, he took the Headless Infant's suggestion and decided not to participate in the attack on the Dark Furnace in the root of all evil. He would only push in the dark and guard the Demon Emperor planet. With his methods, he would attract a group of Sector Lord Old Monsters and even universe-level supreme existences to be his gunmen. Although the dangers of the Dark Furnace were already known to everyone in the 3 major dimensions by now. Otherwise, the root of all evil star domain wouldn't have remained untouched after the previous incident. After all, what happened that day was too shocking. The Eye of Heaven's Way's supreme ferocious power had scared countless people out of their wits. The 2 Sector Lord Old Monsters of the indigenous ferocious beast race couldn't even last one round in front of it and were directly killed, but even so, Yi Xian was still confident that he could attract a large number of gunmen to gather in the root of all evil star domain. Men die for wealth, and birds die for food. This was an unchanging truth since time immemorial. Among the Starry Sky Masters, there was never a lack of existences who would rather tie their heads to their waists and take risks to fight for great fortunes. In fact, Yi Xian could be considered such people. Otherwise, if he hadn't taken risks to fight for a fortune, he wouldn't have been able to go all the way to where he was today. The origin of all evil and the netherworld furnace were indeed dangerous, but as long as the Sector Lord Old Monsters behind the various top powers and races of the 3 Great Planes, and even the supreme existences of the universe, knew how astonishing the good fortune that was being condensed in the netherworld furnace was. At that time, there was no need for anyone to persuade them. Those old guys would automatically come knocking on the door and even fight to the death for it. In this regard, Yi Xian could be considered to have prepared for a rainy day. In fact, he had already made preparations. Of course, once he threw out the clues in his hands, with the brains and insight of those super old monsters, they would definitely be able to guess the truth. They would be able to see that someone wanted to use them as gunmen while they hid in the dark, wanting to benefit from the fisherman's jar. But this didn't matter. Yi Xian wasn't afraid that they would see through this. This was because his goal was only to borrow the hands of this group of super old monsters to destroy the runic chains that transported the all-evil origin elixir out of the netherworld furnace. He didn't want to touch the netherworld furnace and the all-evil origin elixir stored within. In other words, even if those super old monsters successfully destroyed all the rune chains that transported the all-evil origin liquids out of the dark furnace and fulfilled Yi Xian's wish, Yi Xian still wouldn't show up. This was an open scheme. He wasn't worried at all that those super old monsters would steal his fortune. Given the grade of the dark furnace, the universe-level remains of the primordial creatures of the primordial era were merely the lowest standard of raw materials for its condensed products. What right did those super old monsters have to force their way into the dark furnace? Inside, take what they want? Swish. Under the control of Yi Xian, the void-shattering shuttle didn't stop at all. It directly broke through the inner line of defense of the 3 stars of the Demon Emperor Star and noiselessly plunged into the atmosphere of the Demon Emperor Star, shooting toward the Demon Emperor City. Chapter 3896. There were more than 10 Demon Imperial Royal Family experts who flew from the Demon Imperial City to welcome them. Led by the Demon Emperor Mo Wen Tian, Yi Xian had seen them before, but he was not familiar with them. Among the Demon Imperial Royal Family, Grandpa Mo and Grandpa Mo Qigong, who were the closest to him, were still leading the 4 Clans Alliance army to conquer the First Universe's slave clans one by one. As for the Demon Emperor Mo Rentian, he was a Sector Lord old monster. He wasn't even in the Demon Imperial City, but somewhere that was connected to the Demon Imperial planet through a stable space tunnel. It was equivalent to the ancestral land of the demon dwellers. He wouldn't show himself easily. After exchanging a few pleasantries, Yi Xian was led to the royal palace deep in the Demon Imperial City. Everyone sat down. Yi Xian did not immediately mention the matter of the source of all evil. Instead, he first asked about the situation of the 3 Great Plains in the past few days. After all, the First Universe was now in a full-scale expedition. Although the battlefield was in the First Universe, in fact, it was impossible for the Second and Third Universes not to pay close attention. It was even very likely that there would be some kind of response. Seeing that Yi Xian had asked, the upper echelons of the demon cultivator immediately spoke one after another. They introduced and explained the situation and new movements of the 3 Great Plains in the past few days. To Yi Xian's surprise, there was no unusual movement from the races of the Second Universe Federation recently. Ever since they brought back the clansmen who were detained in the Shinong Cauldron from Yi Xian, they had been quiet. It seemed that the pain of the expedition to the First Universe was completely annihilated in the source of all evil. In the end, they were also ruthlessly extorted by the demon cultivator and young Master Linghu. It was as if they were all relieved. The source of all evil was one thing. Even the Sector Lord level indigenous ferocious beast emperor was instantly killed. It was really possible that the races of the Second Universe Federation would be scared out of their wits. They might not be able to recover for a while. However, it would be unrealistic to say that they would be able to let go of the extortion by young Master Linghu and the demon dwellers. According to Yi Xian's estimations, those guys were probably secretly holding back their strength, preparing to wait for the right time to do something bad. However, it didn't matter. Yi Xian didn't care at all. As long as he subdued all the slave races in the First Universe, he was confident that he could forge the First Universe into an iron plate. At that time, the 2 wormholes that connected the Second Universe and the Third Universe, respectively, would be heavily guarded by him. Even if the other party wanted to do something bad, he was afraid that they would be powerless. As for the human clan in the Third Universe, although there was nothing unusual about the immortal dynasty, the human clan's Tenju celestial palace had a piece of explosive news 2 days ago. Several Star-Lord vice-chiefs of the Rinjue Palace had been slain by the invincible war god when they were hunting him down. Then, when the invincible war god reappeared 2 days later, he had already proven his Tao and become a universe dominator in such a short time. Even Master Void Ladle, who was only at the peak of the cosmos realm at the beginning, also became a Star-Lord thanks to the fortuitous encounter. The third universe was in an uproar as soon as the news was spread. The invincible war god's name resounded in the three planes again. It had to be noted that the invincible war god wasn't very strong when he was first born. Nobody expected that he would prove his Tao in such a short time. It was an astonishing speed. What was even more shocking was not that he could control a Star-Lord level old monster, the Void Ladle, but that he was constantly being hunted down by the overlord of the cultivation camp, the Tenju Celestial Palace. While he was rapidly increasing his cultivation base, he was indeed worthy of his title as a peerless genius, to be able to grow at an unimaginable speed in the face of adversity. Unfortunately, until now, there was still no definite answer as to who this devouring treasured body that was known as the invincible war god belonged to. There were all sorts of guesses in the outside world, but in the end, there was no solid evidence that could completely convince people. Then there was the situation in the first universe. After Yi Xian left the allied army of the four clans, the allied army of the Devil Cultivator, Space Rat, Hell Ant, and Giant Ferocious clan led by Grandpa Mo immediately reorganized their army and continued on to the next slave clan after subduing the Ash Wolf clan. However, the alliance of 10,000 races wasn't thwarted because of that. After learning that the coalition army of the four races was about to set off again, all the races in the alliance were mobilized and gathered their forces to resist the enemy. And now, after the allied forces of the four clans had taken down the second slave clan after the Ash Wolf clan, they were on their way to the next clan. It was estimated that they would arrive at that clan in 2 or 3 days and start a new war. In general, the coalition army of the four races had formed. Even if all the other slave races in the first universe were unwilling to be enslaved and formed the alliance of 10,000 races, the final result of this all-out war on the plane level basically didn't have much suspense. In the end, more than 80% of the victory would be taken by the coalition army of the four races. At that time, the first universe would be unified again, and the demon race would become the second overlord of the plane after the Tianji race. I won't leave for the time being. I'll stay on the Demon Emperor planet or in the surrounding star areas and pay close attention to the development of the root of all evil. After understanding the recent developments in the 3 universes, Yi Xian suddenly changed the topic and threw out a heavy bomb. If I'm not wrong, in 2 or 3 days, the races of the Second Universe Federation and the human race of the Third Universe will gather again. The root of all evil will gather again. As for the First Universe, the interstellar war on the plane level is still in full swing. I guess the races won't have the time to care about this. Of course, if the other slave races insist on getting involved, they'll be digging their own graves. We can't do anything about it. Later, find a way to spread the news and inform the Space Rat race, the Hell Ant race, the Giant Ferocious race, and all the races subdued by the coalition army of the four races. In short, within our own race, no one is allowed to get involved in the root of all evil this time. Let's leave the whole star area of the root of all evil to the top forces and races of the second and third universes. It's the same for the demon race. It's best to stay far away. There's no need to stay close to them. Because this time, the big races and the top forces won't send a large number of battleships to form an army like the last time. If there's no accident, in 2 or 3 days, the forces sent by the big forces and secret races will all be high-end battle forces formed by a small number of great beings. The Sector Lord level isn't the limit. This time, it's very likely that even the universe level and immortal level supreme beings will appear. Chapter 3897. As Yi Xian finished speaking, the entire imperial palace was in an uproar. All the upper echelons of the imperial demon race whispered to each other and discussed, universe level and immortal level supreme existences are about to appear? Gathering at the root of all evil? The demon emperor Mo when Tian sucked in a breath of cold air. He looked at Yi Xian with his mouth agape and said in shock, "What's going to happen this time?" The other upper echelons of the imperial demon race all turned their heads and looked over. Their faces were full of shock and strangeness. Because some people had realized that this incident might be related to this monstrous young man in front of them. Before the root of all evil incident began, he had already warned the demon race in advance that it was best not to participate. Otherwise, it would be too late for regrets. In the end, reality proved his words right. Practically all the top-rate powers and clans in the 3 dimensions that had entered the root of all evil to seize the fortune there had been annihilated, and even the 8 region lords had been saved by this young master before him. Not only did he seize this opportunity to detain the 8 domain lords and millions of battleships, as well as the hundreds of millions of universe masters in the battleships, he even abducted the millions of native ferocious beasts led by the immemorial porcupine and the immemorial hairy tortoise. Now, they were his private army. It could be said that the biggest and only winner of the previous root of all evil incident was this man in front of them. Considering that he had foreseen the final result before the incident, although he didn't say it, all the upper echelons of the imperial demon race knew that this incident was most likely secretly planned by him. At least, he played a role in adding fuel to the fire. Now, ever since the last incident, not to mention the inside of the root of all evil, even the surrounding star domains outside of that star domain was almost dead silent. None of the powerhouses of the various races in the first universe dared to get too close. Under such circumstances, this man in front of them suddenly threw out such a heavy bomb. He said that in 2 or 3 days, all the major races and top forces of the 3 dimensions would gather at the root of all evil again. And this time, even though there wouldn't be large amounts of space fleets appearing, the various races and pinnacle powers flocking over would actually have sector lord level, universe level, and even undying level ancestors personally arriving. This was simply terrifying. There was no doubt that if there was such a thing, the person behind all this must be this young master in front of him. How could this just be called audacious? He hadn't even reached the 15th realm, universe realm. Last time, he had toyed with the Star Lord and Domain Lord Old Monsters and accidentally dragged down the 2 Sector Lord Old Monsters. This time, he actually went straight to Sector Lord level, Universe level and Undying level. This was simply the rhythm of ascension. If things went wrong, not to mention the root of all evil star field and the first universe, even the entire 3 great planes would be destroyed by him. Thinking of this, the Devil Emperor Mo Wen Tian's face immediately turned green. After asking the first question, before Yi Xian could respond, he had already continued in a panic. He advised earnestly and patiently, and his tone clearly revealed a bit of pleading. "I say, little friend, no, my little ancestor, can we stop messing around? Last time, you killed 2 Sector Lord Old Monsters. This time, listening to your tone, the Sector Lord level is actually the bottom level, and above that is the universe level. And undying level ancestors are going to be alarmed. This is the rhythm of people dying. Can we stop messing around? Calm down a little, obediently take down the slave races of the first universe first, and unify the entire first universe's dimension. This is a matter of 90% certainty, unlike what you said just now, which is a 90% chance of survival." Hearing these words, Yi Xian was dumbfounded. He stared blankly at the Devil Emperor Mo Wen Tian, his face full of speechlessness. The upper echelons of the demon race in the hall nodded repeatedly like chickens pecking rice. If it was said that the unforeseen event in the root of all evil star field last time made them all fearful of Yi Xian, and felt that this guy was simply a little devil in the chaos. Then now, when Yi Xian said that he was going to mess around there again, and this time, besides the Sector Lord Old Monsters, even the Universe level and Undying level masters would be involved, the upper echelons of the Imperial Demon clan in the hall could no longer find the words to describe the monstrous level of the man in front of them. This Jane was a poison. Wherever she went, there was no way to stop it. All right, this young master admits, this matter this time was caused by me again. To be precise, this young master is about to do it, since everyone in the hall was smart. After what happened last time, they all guessed that he was the mastermind behind the scenes. Yi Xian didn't plan to hide it and openly admitted it. Then, he rolled his eyes and continued, "But don't worry, this time, not only will our camp prohibit anyone from getting involved, even I will not take a single step into the root of all evil star field. After all, this time the sector lords are probably just cannon fodder. Many of the universe levels will die, even the undying levels will probably fall a few. This young master is not afraid of death, but I don't want to actively seek death. Over there, let them mess around, we won't participate, but there shouldn't be a problem if the final goal is achieved. This is a foreshadowing, the benefits may only appear many years later, but I know in my heart. As an ally, I asked the demons to believe in this young master's plans and arrangements, since he had already said so. If there were any objections, they wouldn't even be allies anymore. Furthermore, although this matter was dangerous, it was simply hair-raising, but it wasn't like everyone didn't know the methods of this young master in front of them. Until now, when had he ever suffered a loss? Thinking of this, the upper echelons of the demons all shook their heads and smiled bitterly. Although they didn't say anything, it was obvious that they accepted it tacitly. Here is a video image. This young master took the scene in the netherworld furnace. Seeing that the upper echelons of the demon royal family in the hall had been convinced, Yi Xian casually threw out a jade scroll and said, "Spread it through a certain channel, don't leave any traces, let others know that it's related to the demon race. Other than that, find someone to spread some words. In short, use the fastest speed, let all the races and powers in the 3 big planes hear these words and see this video." The video that Yi Xian was talking about was everything that he had seen and heard in the netherworld furnace. It was all recorded by the devouring system in his body, and now, he had only made a copy and handed it over to the demon royal family. Chapter 3898. This video was automatically recorded by the devouring system in Yi Xian's body when he was in the netherworld furnace. Everything that Yi Xian saw at that time was completely recorded. It included the remains of the primordial supremes and powerful beings that were hunted by the netherworld furnace and thrown into the furnace, as well as the scene in the mysterious void outside the netherworld furnace. In other words, this video not only affected the situation of the netherworld furnace, but also some situations in the mysterious void where the netherworld furnace went to hunt. The situation in the void rifts was reflected in the video to a certain extent. If not, the demon emperor Mo Wentian would not be so shocked. It should be noted that this time, what he saw was a mysterious and unknown universe plane filled with countless void rifts. Within those void rifts were the corpses and bodies of powerful beings from the primordial era who had either died or been severely injured. This kind of video had never appeared in the 3 universes before. Through it, all the starry sky experts and ordinary people in the 3 universes would realize a fact. That was, there must be a large number of similar mysterious planes and voids outside the 3 universes that were known today. What was hibernating in them, or what was left behind, were all of the same thing. Some of the powerful beings from the primordial era who only existed in legends. Moreover, the terrifying netherworld furnace in the depths of the origin of all evil in the first universe had clearly found one of these places. It had completed a hunt there and obtained a large number of remains of powerful beings from the primordial era and even supreme beings from the primordial era. This is too big. What does the netherworld furnace want to do? All the raw materials are the remains of beings above the immortal level. Is it going to grind them up with the huge millstone in the furnace to refine something? Withdrawing his spiritual power from the Jade Scroll, the demon emperor Mo Wentian turned to Yi Xian in horror and said in a trembling voice, "Refining something with such a level of flesh and blood. Not to mention the immortal level, even beings above the immortal level would go crazy for it. This is going to cause chaos in the 3 universes. This is going to lead to chaos. Who cares? It has nothing to do with us anyway." Yi Xian once again threw out a video. It was a video of the netherworld furnace breaking the rune chains on its own in the root of all evil star region. Then, he said, "Hurry up and spread these 2 videos. At the same time, explain that the runic chains extending from the bottom of the outer wall of the netherworld furnace are connected to various unknown voids. The product refined in the furnace is called the all-evil origin liquid, and it will be transported out through these chains. That's right, the all-evil liquid is the final product of the netherworld furnace. It's extremely effective for sector lords, universe level, immortals, and even primordial supreme beings. It's the best at healing injuries and can even improve life levels. It's a top-notch supreme resource. As the chief servant race of the Heaven's legacy race, the demons were also important scouts, so there was naturally no need to doubt their ability to gather intelligence. They had many secret connections, and some even came from the Federation in the second universe and some powerful forces in the third universe's human camp. This was very normal. The demon dwellers' ability to infiltrate was very strong, and they looked no different from the human race. After infiltrating some races and forces, they would hibernate and slowly develop. In the long run, this would be a line. With this kind of accumulation method, just the 2 videos that Yi Xian took out were simply a piece of cake for him to silently spread without a trace. In just half a day, these 2 videos spread throughout the 3 universes, causing an uproar among the various large races and top-notch forces. Just as Yi Xian had predicted, once the 2 videos spread, some people who believed in conspiracy theories immediately expressed concern. They believed that the person who recorded and spread these 2 videos had bad intentions. If they did not handle this well, the tragedy that had just occurred in the root of all evil star region would happen again. This time, it would happen again. Even so, the various large clans and top forces still took action at the first moment. On the first universe's side, the demons and the space mouse race, hell ant race, giant ferocious race, and other races under the Nameless Alliance had already received Yi Xian's notice, and they did not intend to participate in this matter. The other servant races of the first universe basically had no time to care about it. The crisis of the survival of their race was getting closer and closer. Who still had the mood to mess with those? The third universe, the first palace of the Tenju Celestial Palace, the overlord of the human camp, Tenju Celestial Palace. As soon as these 2 videos spread, a loud and clear dragon roar sounded in the Tenju Celestial Palace. Several figures waved their hands and tore through the void, stepped in, and disappeared instantly. Among them, a ferocious bloody giant dragon could even be vaguely seen. Almost at the same time, in the territory of the cultivation camp controlled by the Tenju Celestial Palace, in a relatively remote galaxy void, a black undying dark phoenix with a size of 100,000 feet blasted out from an abandoned star. It soared into the sky, and its huge black phoenix wings flapped gently above its body. A black hole-like whirlpool appeared in the void above it, and the undying dark phoenix plunged headfirst into it. The same or similar scene appeared one after another in the territory of the human cultivation camp, including the Tenju Celestial Palace's Earth-Ju Celestial Palace and Human-Ju Celestial Palace, as well as some ancestral lands of other sects that did not belong to the Tenju Celestial Palace. These figures that moved after hearing the news were at least sector lord level, and there were even universe level and immortal level. They were definitely the overlords of an area, but now, they swarmed over. It was still the third universe, the imperial capital of the human race's technology camp's immortal dynasty, the Immortal Star. The imperial teacher's palace in the outer city area of the immortal imperial city. To be precise, it was actually the underground of the imperial teacher's palace. What appeared in front of them was a huge underground hall. The hall was incomparably vast. No matter which direction they looked at it from, they could not see the end of it. Besides, although it was underground, when they looked up, the bluestone dome of this vast underground hall was at least 10,000 meters high. An underground space of such a scale was not a small project, and it was even more impossible for it to appear under the immortal imperial city. Hence, this underground hall should have been built using space-folding technology. This was the secret base of the imperial tutor, D-Air, in the immortal imperial city. The hall was originally empty, and there was nothing in it. However, at this moment, because this place was too vast, there was no way to distinguish the direction of the hall. With a flash of green light, a high platform appeared in the originally empty hall in the blink of an eye. It was square in shape, and each side was 100 meters long. Right. Xiao. Chapter 3899. It's time to open another seal. As D-Air muttered to himself, there seemed to be a dim light flashing in his body. Then, his aura began to soar at a visible speed. At first, D-Air's aura was only at the peak of the 9th rank universe realm. However, it only took half an instant for him to break through the universe realm and reach the Star Lord state. However, that was obviously just the beginning. After reaching the Star-Lord state, it only took 3 breaths for D-Air's cultivation to reach the peak of the 9th rank Star-Lord state. Then, he broke through again and became a Zone Lord in the blink of an eye. However, that wasn't the end. D-Air's aura was still rising in the Zone Lord state. This time, it only took him 6 breaths to reach the peak of the 9th rank Zone Lord state. Then, he broke through again and reached the Sector Lord state. In this realm, D-Air used 9 breaths of time to increase his strength. In the end, his cultivation finally stabilized and stopped growing. He had reached the peak of the 9th stage of the Sector Lord realm. At the same time, a black hole appeared in the square in front of the boundless underground folded space. It appeared out of thin air and was extremely mysterious. Through the black hole, one could see that there was a mysterious void space inside. There were a large number of battleships and giant mechanical creatures that looked like space fortresses of various shapes. Roar! A huge roar like a tiger's roar came from the black hole. Then, a behemoth stepped out of the black hole, followed by a second one. In the end, 4 giant alloy beasts that were as large as mountains appeared in the vast square. They hovered in the air and emitted a terrifying aura that surpassed D-Air's. D-Air was already at the peak of the 9th rank Sector Lord state. However, the 4 alloy beasts were even stronger than him. Obviously, they were at least at the universe realm. At this time, the black hole behind the 4 alloy behemoths had quietly disappeared, but another slightly smaller black hole appeared again strangely out of thin air. The 4 alloy behemoths shrank until they were only about 1,000 feet in size. After making a soft sound at D-Air, they stepped into the black hole and disappeared in the blink of an eye. *T. At the same time, in the Dorm Elder Pavilion deep in the inner city of the immortal Imperial City, a few streaks of light rushed out and directly shot into the sky. There was no spatial crack at all, but these streaks of light strangely disappeared halfway through their flight. Such a scene occurred in many other places in the territory of the Immortal Dynasty, including the 3 empires under the rule of the dynasty, as well as the headquarters and ancestral lands of the top families and forces such as Bodhi Technology, the Xianyuan family, the Longyu family, the Shinta family, and the Life Gene Society. As for the Heavenly Battle Empire, Patriarch Zhanlu, one of the 2 patriarchs, happened to return. Not only did he break through the Star Lord state and become a region lord, he had even reached the peak of the 9th level. There was no telling what kind of fortuitous encounters he had during his years of travel, but his strength had soared too quickly. The Second Universe. Apart from the Nether Tortoise clan, which had been completely sealed, a large number of races, including the Blood Dragons, the Cyan Rock, the Battle Lions, the Inji clan, the Raging Bulls, the Golden Eagles, the Colorful Pythons, the Greedy Wolves, the Tree Spirits, and the other top 10 races, also heard the news. They all responded. Almost every race had 1 or 2 immortal lords and even universe-grade patriarchs awakened. They tore through the void and swarmed towards the origin of all evil star domain of the first universe. In the secret realm of the Blood Dragon's ancestral land, an enormous cloud of blood was still rolling in the void thousands of kilometers away. They could vaguely see a 9-headed blood dragon roaring furiously. Although its aura was not as strong as the supreme beings of the primordial era such as the Golden Divine Dragon and the Primordial Yiksha, it was no weaker than the almighty beings of the primordial era such as the Void Ladle. The 9-headed blood dragon had clearly been seriously injured and was recovering thanks to the nourishment of the all-evil origin fluid. In the past, a drop of the all-evil origin fluid would drip from the end of the chain every year. However, the 9-headed blood dragon wouldn't consume all of it. It would leave behind a quarter of it and infuse it into the huge blood-colored egg that was surging up and down in the blood cloud central domain. That was its direct descendant. Once it was born, it would possess the cultivation of the universe realm, and its future would be limitless. However, not long ago, the 9-headed blood dragon was poisoned by Black Mark during the last resource supply. It was ambushed by Yi Xian's all-evil poison. Its injuries, which had recovered by 60 to 70%, worsened again. Now, its cultivation had fallen to the quasi-primordial supremes level. But even so, when the news of the source of all evil star domain came again, the 9-headed blood dragon was still alarmed. At this time, it roared furiously and looked back at the blood-colored giant egg in the rolling blood clouds. Its body instantly emitted a monstrous anger of incomparable resentment. Roar! Even his roar faintly revealed a bit of mournful intent. Then, the nine-headed blood dragon's figure disappeared into the rolling blood cloud. After a short while, an energy body clone rushed out of the blood cloud and plunged into the rune chain that was suspended at the highest point of the secret realm. It then disappeared. Such a scene was not only playing out in the ancestral land of the Blood Dragon clan. Several other clans in the top 10 clans of the Second Universe also had an existence whose cultivation had fallen to the quasi-primordial Supremes level. In the form of an energy body clone, they followed the rune chain that supplied them with the all-evil origin fluid every year and angrily rushed toward the source of all-evil star domain in the first universe. Go. For example, in the secret realm of the Green Rock clan's ancestral land, an azure rock that was hundreds of thousands of feet tall rushed out. In the ancestral land of the Battle Lion clan, which ranked third among the top 10 clans in the Second Universe, a blood-colored two-headed battle lion roared angrily at the sky. In the end, it also rushed into the rune chain in the form of an energy body clone. In addition to these bloodline ancestors of the various clans who had not appeared in the world, they were all alarmed. In some remote star domains in the three universes, from time to time, void cracks would quietly open, revealing huge figures with extremely terrifying auras. Chapter 3900. The Root of All Evil. Rumble. Kacha, Kacha. The vast void was empty, and there was no one in sight, but two sounds could be heard in the void. The rumbling of thunder was the sound of the huge millstone turning in the furnace. Both sounds were very low, and they were not very hurried. Instead, they seemed to be a little slow and sluggish. Originally, they should not have such a soul-stirring effect, but when they entered the ears, it made one's body tremble uncontrollably. The strange cracking noises were the sound of the flesh and blood of a large number of powerful primordial creatures being crushed by the cauldron, turning into minced meat and bones. The scene that could be seen inside the furnace could be said to be truly terrifying. The vast interior of the furnace was divided into two areas. The central area was a huge millstone with two levels, and there was a hole in the middle. At this time, there were many desolate creatures' corpses in this huge hole, moving up and down as the two levels of the millstone turned in reverse. It was like a real furnace of flesh and blood. If someone was here, they could even see the corpses of some terrifying creatures like the Golden Divine Dragon in this huge hole. They should be the descendants of the Golden Divine Dragon that hadn't reached the level of the Desolate Supreme yet. Even so, this Golden Divine Dragon should be extremely powerful. Even though it had died countless years ago, and only half of its body was left, one could still feel a powerful pressure coming from it. There were also countless other powerful beings from the primordial era. Originally, there had been thousands of them, but now, there were only about 1,000 of them around the giant millstone. The rest were all thrown into the hole in the center of the millstone. At this time, as the huge furnace of flesh and blood slowly turned, all the desolate creatures' corpses in the center of the millstone were being crushed. Gradually, their original appearances were unrecognizable, whether it was the Golden Divine Dragon, the Desolate Yiksha, the Blood Slaughter Lion, or the Azure Sky Rock. All the desolate creatures' corpses were crushed into meat paste and mixed together. During this process, the flesh and bones mixed with each other, and the blood of different colors mixed with each other. In the end, the flesh and blood could no longer be distinguished from each other. There was no longer any solid matter in the huge hole, but there were still endless rays of light shooting up into the sky. Some of them even dissipated in the void. They were things like karma or the past, things that were seen as impurities and were not retained by the furnace of flesh and blood. There were also some that turned into strands of milky white mist that slowly rose into the air and merged into the thin atmosphere above the cauldron. The milky white mist was the nether furnace milk that was formed by something similar to the connate Tao origins or nascent spirit origins. The fragments of the innate Daos and Yuan Shen were smashed into tiny molecules that could be traced back to their original form. They turned into pure energy and merged into the atmosphere above the furnace. As they accumulated, their density increased and finally turned into this milky white liquid of the dark furnace elixir. This kind of lotion had an extremely miraculous effect. After all, it was condensed from the essence energy of a large number of powerful creatures that were close to or had even reached the level of the Desolation era. It was simply shocking and horrifying. However, it was obvious that they were not the real purpose of the furnace of flesh and blood to refine the desolate creatures' corpses. They were only some byproducts that could be used during the process and would be a waste to discard them. The real product of the dark furnace elixir was the transparent liquid that flowed out from the almost non-existent gap between the two layers of the millstone. The all-evil origin elixir. These powerful desolate-era creatures were of different species. Some of them were golden, and their blood was as bright as the sun, emitting a dazzling golden light. Some of them were burning with blood-red flames, releasing an endless killing intent and evil aura. The blood, flesh, and marrow of the desolate-era creatures of this level would turn into an indescribably weird color after they were crushed into mud, and their auras were extremely chaotic and terrifying. But at this moment, as some impurities such as memories, karma, and so on turned into green smoke and disappeared, and as some unnecessary innate energy was expelled, the liquid rose and condensed into liquid. In the end, the liquid that flowed out from a thin crack at the edge of the furnace was incomparably transparent and colorless. It didn't even emit any aura of pressure. The liquid was as pure as the purest crystal in the world. In the huge hole in the center of the furnace, a huge amount of 9-colored blood mud was rolling. Above the blood mud, the karma impurities, and the milky white mist were also turning into smoke. However, the transparent liquid that flowed out from the gap on the edge of the furnace was dripping drop by drop. After a long time, only one drop fell into the groove under the gap. All of this was the scene inside the netherworld furnace, and it couldn't be seen from the outside. Anyone outside the netherworld furnace could only roughly judge the situation inside through the milky white liquid above the mouth of the furnace and the rumbling thunder and cracking sounds coming from inside the furnace. At this moment, the last batch of thousands of desolate-era creatures' corpses were also pulled into the huge hole in the center of the millstone of the central region by the power of the netherworld furnace's internal field. Then, the low buzzing and cracking sounds came out. This continued for about half a day, and then it gradually weakened again. But now, the milky white mist at the mouth of the cauldron that was like the atmosphere of the stars was already very, very thick. Even though the rumbling of thunder still existed within the netherworld furnace, that kind of strange cracking sound that made one's scalp go numb was almost inaudible. All the corpses of the desolate-era creatures had been crushed into meat paste, and their original shapes couldn't be seen anymore. Although the bloodline ancestors of the various races and top forces who were hibernating in the void far away from the netherworld furnace didn't see this scene with their own eyes, they could easily deduce it. Finally, someone couldn't hold back and suddenly made a move. Fellow Taoists, the raw materials have been crushed into meat paste, and the condensation has begun. It can't be stopped. The time has come. A giant beast rushed out, and a figure stood on its back. It was an ancestor of the 10 Ultimates Celestial Palace of the Earth Ultimates Palace of the Third Universe. This master and servant were both terrifying late-stage sector lords. They were the first to shoot towards the netherworld furnace. The all-evil origin elixir is about to be produced. We have to break the transportation chains immediately. Otherwise, everyone's efforts will be in vain. Screech. How dare you! If you dare to break the chains of the netherworld furnace, our race will fight to the death with your 10 ultimate celestial palace. A purple-gold giant eagle suspected to be from the golden eagle race of the top 10 races of the second universe soared into the sky. It was tens of thousands of feet long, and the aura in its body surged as it followed closely behind. Chapter 3901. Screech. How dare you! If you dare to break the chains of the netherworld furnace, our clan and your 10 ultimate celestial palace will fight to the death. A purple-gold giant eagle that was suspected to be from the Golden Eagle clan, one of the top 10 clans in the second universe, leaped into the air. Its wingspan spanned tens of thousands of feet, and the aura in its body surged as it rushed out. Its target was not the netherworld furnace, but the master and servant of the ultimate celestial palace who wanted to break the transmission chains of the netherworld furnace. This scene was strange, but the terrifying existences that were hibernating in the surrounding void did not seem surprised, as if they had already expected this situation. That's right, this time, the patriarch-level existences from the various clans and top forces in the second and third universes came to the source of all evil star domain for completely different purposes. It could even be said that they came in opposite directions. The two camps of the human race in the third universe, including some old monsters from the myriad Luo Federation Senate, and some idle patriarch-level figures from various parts of the three dimensions, came to the source of all evil for the same purpose: to break the rune chains that transported the all-evil origin liquid out of the netherworld furnace. Passage. Then, they would think of a way to obtain the all-evil origin liquid in the netherworld furnace. However, the bloodline patriarchs from the various clans in the second universe's federation did not come here to seize the fortune in the netherworld furnace, but to prevent the rune chains from being broken. This was because the bloodline patriarchs of the various clans in the second universe were basically the same as the nine-headed blood flood dragon of the blood flood dragon clan and other terrifying existences. They had vested interests in the products of the netherworld furnace. Although the various clans in the second universe had previously launched an army of 10 million battleships to conquer the first universe and charge into the source of all evil star domain. But in fact, even at that time, their purpose was only to fully control the source of all evil star domain and forbid any other forces from entering to prevent the Venom incident from happening again. Of course, in addition to the bloodline patriarchs of the various clans in the second universe's federation, there were also some idle old monsters from various parts of the three dimensions. Among them, there were also vested interests in the products of the netherworld furnace. Perhaps on the surface, this group of independent old monsters had nothing to do with the various clans in the second universe's federation, but when it came to the rune chains of the netherworld furnace, the interests of the two sides were clearly tied together and unknowingly stood on the same side. Golden Eagle Race, is this the idea of your race, or the idea of the races of the second universe? A white-bearded, black-haired, green-robed elder took a step forward. His eyes gleamed as he gazed at the purple gold eagle. His formless eyes shot out sparks of blood as he gazed at it. This was also a universe-level supreme old monster. This person's name was Gong San, and he was originally a Star Lord from the 10 Extreme Celestial Palace. Tens of thousands of years ago, not long after the formation of the 10,000 Luo Federation, the 10 Extreme Celestial Palace, which represented the human cultivation camp, entered the Federation Senate. Today, he had already grown to the universe level and was the second echelon of the Federation Senate. A top-notch elder. Previously, when the various clans of the second universe's federation launched an army of tens of millions of battleships to launch an all-out expedition against the first universe, the 10,000 Luo Federation was already extremely dissatisfied. Now, a bloodline ancestor of the Golden Eagle race had appeared and was clamoring and threatening the 10 Extreme Celestial Palace. Gong San couldn't bear it anymore and immediately expressed his stance on behalf of the Federation. Golden Eagle, don't forget, the various clans of the second universe are also members of the Federation. On the matter of the netherworld furnace, the Federation Senate has already given clear instructions. I advise you not to go against the wishes of the Federation. What a joke. The various clans of the second universe are only members of the 10,000 Luo Federation. We are not subordinates of the Federation. Even the Federation Senate has no right to impose their wishes on our clans and make any compulsory orders. In the distant void, a giant rock with green feathers and countless golden rays of light spread out its wings and rushed out from the void. This should be a bloodline ancestor of the Green Rock clan, one of the top 10 clans of the second universe. His strength was comparable to that of Gong San, who was from the Federation Senate. He was also at the universe level. He replied without any trace of politeness, the products of the netherworld furnace are closely related to the interests of the various clans of the second universe. It is impossible for you not to know this. The human race is also one of the members of the Federation. This time, they ignored the allies of the various clans of the second universe and came to the source of all evil to seek the benefits of the netherworld furnace. Not only did the Senate of the Federation not stop them, but they even colluded with them. It is really cold to the hearts of the various clans. Regarding this matter, the 10,000 Luo Federation must give the various clans of the second universe an explanation. Whether it is the 10 absolute sky palaces of the human race, the Undying Dynasty, or the great beings of the Senate of the Federation, they must immediately withdraw from the star field of the source of all evil. Otherwise, they will see the various clans of the second universe as nothing. At this point, the universe-level Green Gold Rock's tone turned harsh. He sneered and said, "If you insist on acting alone and ignore the interests of our clans, then it is fine if the various clans of the second universe do not join this federation. Today, we will withdraw from the 10,000 Luo Federation. Parting ways in the future is a small matter, but turning against each other and becoming enemies is a big matter. Where do you want to go? I advise you to think twice before you act. Otherwise, the two planes will break apart today. The 10,000 Luo Federation will no longer exist, and all the various clans of the second universe will withdraw, boom, screech, roar." Just as this universe-level Green Gold Rock finished speaking, the entire star field of the source of all evil went into an uproar, and the surrounding space was in an uproar. The various super-old monsters, who had hidden themselves in space and had yet to show themselves, were all shocked. The attitude of the bloodline ancestor of the various clans of the second universe was too unyielding. He was clearly trying to force the 10,000 Luo Federation to make concessions and withdraw from the star field of the source of all evil with the great beings of the two camps of the human race. Otherwise, all the various clans of the second universe would withdraw from the Federation, and the impact would be no different from the collapse of the entire 10,000 Luo Federation. The consequences were too severe. Although the one who said this was only a universe-level bloodline ancestor of the Green Gold Rock race in the second universe, this was clearly the common wish of all the core upper echelons of the various clans in the second universe. On the matter of the benefits of the underworld furnace, the various clans of the second universe had already reached a consensus. The words of any bloodline ancestor from any clan represented the collective wishes of the entire clan. At this time, the entire star field of the source of all evil was in an uproar because of the universe-level Green Gold Rock's words. The various super-old monsters from the various clans of the second universe all let out furious roars and screeches at the first moment. The entire star field of the source of all evil was filled with roars and howls. Tens of super-old monsters simultaneously emitted their energies. They were all at least sector lords, and there was no lack of universe-level or even undying beings amongst them. Chapter 3902. Roar. Roar. The entire origin of all evil star field was disturbed by the roars and howls. Dozens of sector lord level and above super-old monsters from the various races of the second universe were supporting the Green Gold Great Rock, and it was also a strong declaration of their stance. It was also a threat. They demanded that the two camps of the human race and the upper echelons of the myriad Luo Federation Senate immediately withdraw from this star field. In the future, they would still be allies. Otherwise, they would part ways in the future and become enemies today. The atmosphere instantly became oppressive to the extreme. In the entire vast and boundless star field, half of the roars and roars shook the heavens, and the aura surged and rose. The other half had completely fallen into silence. Some of the rogue cultivator super-old monsters who did not belong to the two opposing camps were still hibernating. They were waiting. What would happen next would be determined by the changes in the overall situation. As for the two camps of the human race and the few super-old monsters who represented the Federation Senate, they were in a dilemma. The attitude of the races of the second universe had already been put on the table. There was no room for negotiation. They could not give up the benefits represented by the netherworld furnace. If the two camps of the human race and the Federation Senate of the third universe insisted on their own way, the final result could be foreseen. Today, the races of the second universe would definitely withdraw from the myriad Luo Federation, and even become enemies. At that time, the entire myriad Luo Federation would only have one member, the human race. Could it still be called the Federation? Even if it still existed, it was basically just a name. The consequences were too serious. It concerned the survival of the myriad Luo Federation. Even the super-old monsters of the Senate, such as Gong San, did not dare to deal with this matter lightly. After a short silence, the few super-old monsters from the Federation Senate seemed to have finally reached a consensus. They sent Gong San as a representative and spoke again. This time, Gong San did not directly talk to the races of the second universe. Although he did not name them, everyone knew that his words were directed at the two camps of the human race of the third universe. Heaven Palace, Imperial Court, this matter concerns the survival of our Federation, and the benefits of this netherworld furnace are indeed related to the races of the second universe. It is closely related. All of you were originally allies, but because of the same goal, we gathered together and formed the Myriad Luo Federation today. It's normal to have disagreements. This matter is not completely without room for compromise. What the Council of Elders means is, since we are all allies, this matter can be resolved internally. The Council of Elders is willing to be a witness and urge everyone to reach a final consensus on this matter. This was clearly a concession. Although the several super-old monsters of the Federation's Senate were indignant and even felt a little aggrieved, the attitude of the various races of the second universe was so tough. This matter concerned the survival of the entire Wan Luo Federation, so they had no choice but to treat it cautiously. Unfortunately, whether it was the two camps of the human clan in the third universe or the various races in the second universe, none of them seemed to appreciate his kindness. A universe-level super-old monster from 10 Absolute Sky Palace immediately expressed his opinion. There is no room for discussion. The underworld furnace is not the underworld furnace of the various races of the second universe. It does not belong to any race or power. That's right. Since the various races of the second universe know that they are members of the Federation, they should be even more tactful. In the Undying Dynasty camp, a universe-level old monster from Su Lao Gu sneered. Of the 10,000 chains of runes that send the all-evil liquid out of the underworld furnace, nearly a quarter of them are connected to the ancestral grounds of the various races of the second universe. This matter has been confirmed by our imperial teacher, Great God Di. The result of Tong Tong's deduction. The various races of the second universe have occupied nearly a quarter of the resources of the underworld furnace for who knows how many years, but they have always kept it a secret from the two camps of the human clan and the headquarters of the Federation. We can ignore this matter, but now that everything has surfaced, why can't the human clan fight for this benefit? Just because the various races of the second universe acted earlier and obtained the benefits of the underworld furnace, has it become a habit? Or perhaps, the various races of the second universe think that they are strong and powerful. That they can ignore the entire human race of the third universe and the Wan Luo Federation? Howl. Screech. The words of the universe-level Su Lao Gu from the Undying Dynasty were sharp and aggressive. Before he could finish speaking, angry roars and howls rose to the sky from the various races of the second universe. Human clan, do you really think that your clan is the only one with the greatest power in the three universes? The Tianji clan has gone into seclusion and migrated. Do you humans want to replace them and become the public enemy of the three universes? The top-level upper echelons of the two camps have expressed their views at the same time. Are you clearly planning to use the various races of the second universe to establish your might? The Wan Luo Federation is indeed on the verge of collapse. The ambitions of the human clan are clear as day. Fine, let's fight. It seems that the rupture between the two universes is unavoidable today. It's a pity that the Wan Luo Federation. There's nothing to be said about it. When the Federation was first established, it was for the purpose of jointly attacking the Tianji clan. However, the Tianji clan has gone into seclusion. Even if they return to the world one day, who knows how many tens of thousands of years it will be. Before that, any race will have the opportunity to replace them. They will become the strongest overlords of the three universes. It's obvious that the human clan is ready to make a move. Their attitude today is clear proof that their ambitions have sprouted. As these angry roars and mocking voices rang out, the entire star field, the source of all evil, once again fell into an uproar. The super-old monsters of the various races of the Federation of the Second Universe roared and expressed their views. The super-old monsters of the two camps of the human clan, as well as some of the top factions and idol sects, were enraged. Some of the independent cultivators and the descendants of the primordial creatures who did not belong to the two camps of power wisely remained silent. They paid close attention to the development of the situation, vigilantly watching from the sidelines. Only the few super-old monsters of the Wan Luo Federation Senate fell into deep embarrassment at this time. whether it was the two camps of the human clan's immortal dynasty and the Tenju celestial palace from the third universe or the various races of the Federation from the second universe, none of them gave them any face this time. Previously, Gong San had represented the few super-old monsters of the Federation's Senate to tactfully express their hope that the two sides would have internal peace talks. This was already a slightly sullen concession made by the Federation. Unexpectedly, the final result was so unbearable. The Federation's Senate made a concession in public, but whether it was the human clan or the various races of the second universe, none of them took it seriously and completely ignored their existence. The Wan Luo Federation was completely isolated. All the internal members did not take it seriously and wantonly ignored it. For the few super-old monsters of the Federation's Senate, this matter was simply a slap in the face in public. It was too humiliating. Screech. Chapter 3903. Among the major races and top forces in the three dimensions, the strongest combat power that any force could send was at the immortal level. Although there were existences beyond the immortal level in the ancestral secret realms of the major races and forces, such as the nine-headed blood dragon and the blood dragon clan's lair in the second universe, he was in existence at the level of the desolate era, which was far beyond the immortal level. However, existences at this level were almost all seriously injured and couldn't come out. Besides, if they forced themselves to come out, once enemies were attracted, they wouldn't be able to protect themselves and might be killed. The more powerful an existence was, the more they cherished their feathers and wouldn't take risks easily. The immortal level was the strongest combat power that could be sent from the three dimensions of the universe today. It should be so for a long time in the future. Even if the situation in the origin of all evil star field was turbulent again, almost all the top races and forces in the three dimensions had sent their strongest combat power and swarmed over. However, there were definitely no more than 10 immortal-level old monsters hibernating in this star field now. Therefore, when the immortal-level old monster of the Federation Senate spoke out in anger, the surrounding void instantly fell silent. Neither the two camps of the human race nor the various races of the second universe refuted on the spot. It wasn't that there weren't any immortal-level existences in the human race. In fact, various races of the second universe also had immortal-level old monsters in the origin of all evil star field, and like the human race, there was more than one of them. But even so, the immortal-level existences of the two sides wouldn't easily express their opinions and speak out in front of them. No one at the immortal level was simple. Otherwise, how could they be called immortal? Therefore, existences at this level wouldn't easily make enemies. Of course, this referred to enemies at the immortal level of the same realm. The entire star field fell into a dead silence after the immortal level old monster's angry voice, but it was also at this moment that an unforeseen event suddenly happened. Rumble, buzz. In the netherworld furnace, the crunching sound of flesh and bones being crushed had disappeared, but the huge millstone was still rotating, so the low rumble of thunder didn't stop. In addition, at this moment, in the continuous low rumble of thunder, there was a faint buzzing sound that attracted everyone's attention. In their line of sight, among the tens of thousands of rune chains around the outer wall of the netherworld furnace, a few had quietly lit up. The huge chains extended to the end of their line of sight, reaching into the void, and no one knew where they led. As for the extremely long rune chains, starting from the bottom of the outer wall of the netherworld furnace, countless runes quietly lit up on the surface of the chains as if they were activated. There were a total of 9 chains like this. This meant that at least 9 drops of the origin of all evil star field was being transported out along these 9 chains. Of course, the origin of all evil star field world sect, the second universes of the origin universe, of course, the various races of the origin of all. The origin of all origin of all evils exist field was the of the universe origin of the immortal level universe world origin, and now, this, they, it, and that absolutely, this, of them, complete. Not good, the netherworld furnace's first batch of products has already been condensed and is being transported out. We must stop it. From the 2 videos that have been circulated, the total amount of products that the netherworld furnace can condense should be around 3,000 to 4,000 drops. The first batch should be at least 1/10 of the total. In that case, 300 to 400 drops of all evil origin liquid will be produced in a short time and transported out immediately. Take action immediately and break the rune chains that are transporting the origin of all evil in the netherworld furnace. No matter what, we must keep the all-evil origin liquid in the netherworld furnace. Fellow Taoists, this matter concerns all of our interests. Obtaining the all-evil origin liquid from the netherworld furnace is the next step. There's no need to rush the distribution plan. It won't be too late to discuss it later. But now, the netherworld furnace has already begun to transport the products out. If we don't stop it, we'll all end up empty-handed today. Let's take action together. 10,000 rune chains is a lot of work. We can't delay any longer. Roar. Screech. Furious roars rang out one after another. The group of super old monsters that had been hibernating in the void were all anxious. There were close to 200 sector lord level existences that had descended this time. Among them, close to half were from various races in the second universe. They were already standing on the opposite side of the netherworld furnace. Even if they succeeded in the end, they wouldn't be able to get even a single drop of all evil origin liquid. In other words, the total amount of all evil origin liquid in the netherworld furnace had reached 3,000 to 4,000 drops. In the end, it would be divided among the 100+ super old monsters on the attacking side. On average, each of them would get 300 to 400 drops. Even if some immortal level old monsters and universe old monsters might get a little more, when it came to the weakest sector lord level existences, each of them would get at least 100 drops of all evil origin liquid. This was definitely a terrifying number. Such a top-grade resource was something that even immortal level existences, primordial level existences, and primordial supreme level existences needed. Even sector lord level old monsters would thank the heavens if they could get even 1 or 2 drops. 100 drops was definitely enough to make them go crazy. Under this kind of crazy profit, there was no need for anyone to mobilize. A large number of super old monsters that had been hibernating in the surrounding void, in just a few short breaths, all rushed out of the void cracks where they were hiding and appeared in this star field, the source of all evil, with surging auras all over their bodies. Kill. Their auras surged into the heavens and surged toward the huge netherworld furnace in the depths of the void ahead. Seeing this scene, the expressions of the upper echelons of the various races in the second universe couldn't help but change. A large number of figures that had been hibernating in the void suddenly appeared. They roared and revealed their bloodline true bodies. Their figures were tens of thousands of zhang tall as they roared and rushed forward to block the netherworld furnace. Roar, a 10,000 zhang tall silver wolf howled towards the sky. Above the origin of all evil star domain, a huge silver moon like a star appeared. Damn it, these bastards are crazy. Stop them immediately. Otherwise, I won't be able to answer to the ancestor of the race. This was a universe-level ancestor of the greedy wolf clan. His bloodline aura was so powerful that it was terrifying. Once the bloodline ability of the greedy wolf howling moon was unleashed, the aura far surpassed that of the descendants of the greedy wolf clan that Yi Xian had come into contact with before. Countless silver moonlight blades rained down from the silver moon above, instantly turning the depths of the root of all evil star region into a sea of light blades. Every single silver moon blade was incomparably sharp. Not only were the same level universe level existences wary of them, even the few immortal level existences were avoiding them. They didn't want to be injured by these silver moon blades, as that would damage the prestige of the immortal level existences. Pooh! Pooh! A muffled sound resounded. 2 sector lord level old monsters were careless and instantly met with a calamity. One was decapitated by the silver moon blades, the other was cut in half at the waist, dying in the blink of an eye. Chapter 3904. Whoosh, a large amount of rain-like crashing sounds could be heard. On the right side of the void, a huge mottled ancient tree began to stretch its branches and leaves. The huge tree took root in the void. Its roots couldn't be seen, but its size was constantly growing. In the blink of an eye, it was already 1,000,000 feet tall. The huge tree crown shrouded a large part of the void of the universe and extended to the edge of the netherworld furnace in front. This huge tree was the true body of an immortal rank ancestor of the Tree Spirit clan, one of the top 10 clans in the second universe. At this moment, this terrifying huge tree was like a star, standing in the void. As long as the roots that hadn't appeared were not destroyed, it would be fine. Even if the leaves were broken, it could grow again. Just like the Greedy Wolf clan's bloodline ability, the Greedy Wolf Howling Moon, after the Tree Spirit clan's true body appeared, the area under the tree crown would also become an indiscriminate regional attack. The species of this old tree was very extraordinary. It was the rare undying void pine. Every branch of the huge tree crown was covered with countless small pine needles. These pine needles were even made of metal. It was said that the undying void pine had to take root in the mine of undying void gold, a starry sky supreme treasure level divine metal. After countless years of nurturing, it could give birth to wisdom. From a spirit tree, it could become a plant life with wisdom, which was the Tree Spirit clan's clansman. The undying void gold was extremely rare. Yi Xian's nirvana indestructible armor had once merged with a piece. Since then, Yi Xian had never seen a second piece of undying void gold. It could be seen how rare this kind of metal was. Before the undying void pine gave birth to wisdom, it had been nurtured in the mine of undying void gold for countless years. It had absorbed a large amount of undying void gold's golden energy and had long been contaminated with it. Its roots were rooted in the void and couldn't be seen, which was related to this. In addition, the countless golden needles on the huge tree crown of this rare plant all contained a trace of undying void gold's golden energy. They were extremely sharp and fast, which was impossible to guard against. Whoosh! 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 A series of faint swishing noises burst out. The crown-like treetops slightly shook. Within the blink of an eye, countless golden needles darted out like raindrops, covering the entire area around the dark cauldron. In the face of this level of attack, even the few immortal old monsters present couldn't help but frown. Each of them displayed their own abilities to resist or avoid the attack. However, even more of the top experts of the various forces were unable to avoid it, and were more or less affected by it. Roar! Screech! A miserable shriek resounded as a Sector Lord old monster from the technology faction was pierced into a human sieve by the undying void pine needles, dying instantly. His body was dripping with golden blood as he fell into the void below. There was even a universe-level warrior who should have been an ancient unaffiliated warrior with the bloodline of the lion beast. Countless golden pine needles pierced through his head. He struggled in space for 2 breaths before finally dying. Boom! Hua la la. At the same time, a series of clanking sounds of chains came together with a huge roar. Just as the Silver Wolf and the Undying Pine of Void unleashed their might and launched a large-scale indiscriminate attack, the 2 major human camps, the few powerful elders of the Federation Senate who had been isolated, and some ancient itinerant cultivators also attacked. They also launched attacks on the Dark Cauldron. Although most of them were Sector Lord-level existences, there were quite a few universe-level beings as well. There were even 7 or 8 immortal old monsters. Under the full power of their abilities, hundreds of rune chains were broken in an instant. They were all the chains that were transporting the all-evil origin liquid from the bottom of the Dark Cauldron's outer wall. They were cut off from the edges of the Dark Cauldron's outer wall, leaving behind only a few hundred to a few thousand feet long. Although the Dark Cauldron had already given birth to a weapon spirit, it was currently focused on refining the all-evil origin liquid. It had no time to care about such attacks, so it didn't react at all. In any case, the Dark Cauldron's body was too sturdy, and its internal field was shockingly powerful. It couldn't be forcefully broken. Besides, after the Dark Cauldron gave birth to a weapon spirit, it could temporarily break free from the bindings and restraints of the rune chains. However, the hundreds of rune chains that were forcefully separated from the Dark Cauldron's outer wall were forcefully broken by various abilities of Sector Lord level and above. The order runes near the ends of the chains had already been destroyed. The runes were completely destroyed. Under such circumstances, the Dark Cauldron itself couldn't be repaired unless the Heavenly Tao's Green Eye intervened. In fact, even if the Heavenly Tao's Green Eye were to act again, it was basically unrealistic to want to completely repair all the rune chains that transported the all-evil origin liquid out. Whether it was the Dark Cauldron or the rune chains, they were all forged from special divine metals. Engraving the mysterious runes on the chains was an extremely taxing matter. Not to mention whether the heavens Tao's azure eye still had a large amount of similar divine metals in his possession. Even if he did, it was absolutely not easy to reconnect all of these over 10,000 rune pattern chains and brand them with transmission runes. Whether it was Yi Xian or the higher-ups of the various clans and top-notch factions that had flocked over for the sake of the Dark Cauldron, all of them were well aware of this. Otherwise, they wouldn't have thought of such a method to prevent the Dark Cauldron from transporting the all-evil origin liquid. It could be said that once a rune chain was broken, there was basically no possibility of it being repaired, at least in the short term. It was precisely because of this that all the ancestor-level existences in the attacking camp were instantly invigorated after the first round of attacks broke all the hundreds of rune chains. Just a single round of full-powered attacks had destroyed a few % of the 10,000 chains of runes that were transporting the all-evil origin liquid. This was definitely an exhilarating result. They immediately charged toward the other rune chains, dodging the frenzied attacks of the bloodline ancestors of the various clans in the second universe as they launched a second round of attacks with all their might. His only objective was to completely destroy the talisman marking chains that transported the all-evil origin liquid into the surroundings as soon as possible. Rumble. Kacha kacha, screech. The entire void was boiling. A gigantic silver moon in the sky was constantly sprinkling down silver moon blades. There was also an undying void pine that was swaying slightly like a pillar that supported the sky, shooting out dense golden pine needles, reaping the life of a super-old monster from time to time. Many of the super-old monsters of the various clans in the second universe had revealed their bloodline true forms and were engaged in a bloody battle with the super-old monsters of the attacking camp. Chapter 3905. Rumble. Kacha, kacha, thunderous booms rang out incessantly, accompanied by cracking noises. This was already the sixth wave of attacks. More than half of the 10,000 rune chains that transported the all-evil origin elixir to the outside of the netherworld cauldron had already been broken. Currently, there were only about 4,000 chains that were still connected to the netherworld cauldron. After this wave of attacks, hundreds of rune chains were broken. Only a few hundred meters of them remained hanging on the outer wall of the furnace, looking extremely bleak and desolate. The number of rune chains decreased sharply once more, leaving only around 3,000. However, the entire furnace that was as huge as a superstar still didn't move. The humming sound of the huge millstone rotating inside was still present, indicating that the all-evil origin liquid was still being refined. At the same time, the rune seal was still in the process of delivering the all-evil origin liquid. More than 6,000 rune chains had already been broken, and among the remaining 3,000 or so rune chains, several dozen of them, lit up at the same time from the end connected to the netherworld cauldron. This meant that more than 100 drops of all-evil origin liquid were about to be transported out. This meant that the corresponding rune chains of the transportation channel had been activated. Stop it. Break this portion of the chains immediately. You want to steal this old man's all-evil origin liquid? Impossible. Screech. Furious roars rang out. Over 100 sector Lord Old monsters from the punitive expedition camp all made their moves, unleashing all sorts of divine abilities. A small part of the sky was illuminated by the resplendent light. It was incomparably dazzling. Whoosh, 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 poo. During this process, the towering undying void pine tree was still shooting out endless golden pine needles. Occasionally, some super-old monsters would be hit, but they all protected their vitals. Even if they were hit by the golden pine needles and some unimportant parts were pierced, they would only suffer a small wound and nothing more. Although the golden pine needles of the undying void pine were sharp and shockingly fast, making them difficult to dodge, it was still an area of effect attack. The power of a single needle was limited, and as long as one wasn't hit by the concentrated attack, there was no danger to one's life. It was precisely because of this that within a short period of time, almost none of the experts who were conquering an area went to attack it. Its roots were rooted in the void, impossible to see at all, impossible to completely eliminate in a short period of time. On the other hand, the gigantic silver moon that resembled a star in the sky showered countless silver moon blades. They circled and attacked in an unpredictable manner. Although they were not as powerful as the immortal rank undying void pine, they were superior in that they were strange and difficult to defend against. Every time they circled, they would hit the more important parts of the body. A universe-level warrior from the human race's 10 absolute sky palace was hit by a few giant silver moon blades at the same time. His body was torn apart in the void space, and golden blood rained down. He died in an instant. Screech. Greedy wolf, you are courting death. A blood dragon rushed out of the void, emitting a dense blood-colored baleful aura. Its aura was terrifying. It had actually reached the universe 9th level and could be considered a half-step immortal. This was just the blood dragon. In fact, there was a figure standing on top of the blood dragon's head. It was a top-old monster from the 10 Absolute Sky Palace, the second palace of the 10 Absolute Sky Palace, the Earth Absolute Sky Palace. He was an immortal-level existence. At this moment, he rushed out with a roar. The half-step immortal-level blood dragon under the immortal-level old monster let out a ferocious dragon roar towards the sky. It opened its mouth to swallow the giant silver wolf. Gong Ju Sha, how dare you! Almost at the next moment, from the other side of the void, an imperishable old monster from a certain race in the second universe roared and rushed out. His body turned into an arrow that pierced through the void and traveled billions of miles in an instant, shooting toward the head of the blood-red dragon. Although the huge silver wolf of the ravenous wolf race only had a universe-grade cultivation base and had yet to reach the immortal level, its ravenous wolf howling moon bloodline ability was extraordinary. It was comparable to the battle lion race's Mad Lion 9. However, the 9 transformation Mad Lion was amazing because of its continuous increase in strength. With each transformation, its chi, blood, and body size would increase by 10 times. However, the greedy wolf howling moon was different. It was the same as the rain of golden pine needles of the undying void pine. It was an area attack, but it was more treacherous. It could be said that it had control of the general situation of the battlefield. It had an extremely important positive effect. Therefore, even if this silver wolf only had a universe-level cultivation base, its role in the entire battlefield was absolutely not to be underestimated. Otherwise, this undying old monster in the various camps of the second universe would not have suddenly rushed out at this time, blocked the blood dragon, and swallowed it. Your opponent is this old man. That silver wolf can't escape. The great ancestor of the Earth Absolute Sky Palace, known as Gong Ju Sha, was a blood-robed old man. At this moment, he let out a cold laugh. With a wave of his hand, a blood-colored cage appeared out of thin air above the void space. It rumbled and suppressed, covering a large part of the universe void space within a radius of 1,000,000 miles. It happened to be the immortal-level old ancestor of a certain race in the second universe who was about to make a move. He was trapped in it. Then, Gong Ju Sha took a step forward. His figure flashed and had already entered the blood-colored cage. His voice was still echoing in the void space outside the cage, full of murderous intent. The prison of drawing ground that I cast, even immortal-level existences of the same realm cannot break through. Today, I will kill you in this cage. Hong. Hong, long, long, before his voice had died away, an earth-shattering energy explosion sounded in the confined void space within a radius of 1,000,000 miles that was covered by the blood-colored cage. The two immortal realm old monsters finally started to fight, and it was a life-and-death battle. If it weren't for Gong Ju's great power of drawing a circle to bind and cover the entire battlefield within a radius of 1,000,000 miles, who knew how many powerhouses from both sides would have been injured by the fierce aura that shot out from their bodies? Howl. Almost at the same time, in the distant void space, a shrill howl sounded. It was obviously a wolf's howl, but it was not long. It seemed to be extremely short. The huge silver moon that had been hanging high in the void space above the source of all evil star field also quietly collapsed at this moment. At this time, if one turned to look at the source of the howl, they would be able to see the huge silver wolf's head being eaten by the blood dragon, and the headless body falling into the depths of the void space below. A powerful immortal-level old monster fell just like that. The situation of the battle was getting more and more tragic, however, this was only the beginning. The degree of tragedy of this battle was obviously not going to stop here. Until now, sector lords and universe-level old monsters had all fallen. Next, immortal-level supreme existences might also fall. No one had expected this scene to come so quickly. Less than 15 minutes after Crimson devoured the silver wolf's head, a loud rumbling suddenly rang out from the gigantic crimson cage that enveloped an area of millions of kilometers in radius. Chapter 3906. An immortal old monster had fallen just like that. When Gong Ju Gong's immortal ancestor Gong Ju Sha walked out of the blood-red cage area with his head in one hand, the surrounding void was dead silent. The roar and explosion of the fierce battle and the clashing of magical powers were all stagnant. Now, there were only about 10 immortal realm old monsters in this star field, the source of all evil. Now, one of them had died. This was too shocking. In a short period of time, everyone's mind was filled with roaring sounds. Especially the dozens of top masters of various races in the second universe, their feelings were even more complicated at this moment. Among the nearly 200 top-notch elites who stayed in this star sector, the number of elites who attacked the Array Palace was very high. There were more than 100 of them, but there were only 70 or so races in the second universe. They were in a slightly weaker position. In terms of the strongest immortal old monsters, the two camps of the human clan and the Senate of the Federation each had one, so there were 3 of them. The other 3 were ancient rogue cultivators who came and went alone, but in fact, they could also be regarded as the power of the conquering camp. Among the more than 70 top masters of various races in the second universe, there were only 3 immortal old monsters. Counting them, the number was exactly half of the enemy camp, which was already an extremely worrying situation. But now, one of the 3 immortal realm old monsters had unexpectedly fallen in the short time it took to drink a cup of tea. Such a situation was undoubtedly worse for the races in the second universe. It was more and more unfavorable, and it seemed that they could not hold on any longer. In fact, of the more than 10,000 rune chains under the outer wall of the netherworld furnace, there were only a little more than 1,000 left. Roar! Human clan, Wan Luo Federation, the races in the second universe will fight to the death with you from now on. After a short period of dead silence, among the races in the second universe, a blood-colored lion roared and rushed out. His body expanded again, and every time, it increased by 10 times. This was obviously a bloodline ancestor from the Battle Lion clan. As soon as he appeared, he began to use the bloodline power of the 9 changes of the Mad Lion. Among all the experts that Yi Xian had met before, Shi Wanjin was the one with the strongest talent in this bloodline ability. That guy had comprehended the 4th transformation of the 9 transformation of the Berserk Lion. Once it was activated, his body would instantly transform into a terrifying battle lion that was over 100,000 feet tall. His blood and chi was so abundant that it made one's hair stand on end. However, he was still a junior of the younger generation. In terms of understanding the 9 changes of the Berserk Lion bloodline ability, he might be one of the best in the younger generation, but he couldn't possibly be the number 1 in the entire Battle Lion race. The blood-colored lion that had appeared today had clearly surpassed Shi Wanjin in terms of comprehension of the 9 changes of the Berserk Lion. When the blood-slaughter Berserk Lion went through the 4th transformation, the experts of this race would possess a bloodline true body that was 100,000 feet tall. The 5th transformation would increase the size of this foundation by 10 times. In other words, it would reach 10 million zhang. It would be like a small planet. The scene unfolding before his eyes was exactly such a scene. This bloodline ancestor of the Battle Lion race was originally an immortal old monster. Now that he had displayed the 5th transformation of the 9 changes of the Berserk Lion bloodline ability, he displayed a terrifying bloodline true body that was 100,000 feet tall. It was like a small planet, and its blood and chi was so abundant that it couldn't be estimated. This was directly reflected in his battle strength. The current him might not be able to challenge existences that surpassed the immortal realm, but within the immortal realm, he was practically invincible. Roar! Don't even think about breaking the last 1,000 or so rune chains. This senior won't allow it. Those who act without permission will die. The 100,000 feet tall bloodline true body appeared. At this moment, the immortal Battle Lion's confidence surged to the extreme. He was confident that he could dominate the immortal realm. With such abundant blood and chi, he was definitely an invincible existence. Raising his head and roaring, the immortal battle lion gently raised his left forelimb. It seemed to be lightly pressing down, but it directly destroyed a corner of the void. The Milky Way within 100,000 miles fell into chaos. Dense patterns like a spider web appeared in the void, and from the cracks in the void, endless void turbulence surged. Void turbulence emerged. Caught off guard, 2 sector lords and a universe-level super-old monster were involved. Obviously, they couldn't survive, even their bodies disappeared, swallowed by the infinite darkness. Even some of the zone lords who were watching the show at the edge couldn't control themselves and were directly sucked into the terrifying black hole. Among them was Shui Lu from the Heavenly Battle Empire, which was under the rule of the Immortal Dynasty. He had left the Heavenly Battle planet for 10,000 years and obtained a great opportunity, which allowed him to soar all the way from the Star Lord state to the peak of the 9th level of the Zone Lord state. He had come to the source of all evil star region in order to take advantage of the opportunity to seek fortune, even if it was just to follow behind and get some leftovers. He had even invited a sector lord to help him. He didn't expect to run into trouble at the edge of the battlefield, and his body was instantly swallowed by the black hole. Roar. Immortal battle lion, you're too arrogant. So what if your blood and chi are abundant? You're the only immortal being left among the races of the second universe, apart from that giant tree. You're destined to die alone. Why waste time talking to him? Just suppress him. Roar, as the immortal battle lion spoke arrogantly. 4 of the 6 immortal beings on the side of the punitive expedition team rushed out and attacked the immortal battle lion from 4 different directions. As for the other 2 immortal beings, they led the 100 sector lords and universe-level warriors to continue attacking the Netherworld Cauldron. Their target was very clear, the remaining 1,000 rune chains under the wall of the Netherworld Cauldron. An earth-shattering battle began again. At this moment, all the great beings on both sides forgot about the shock of seeing the immortal being beheaded by Gong Ju. The entire void was trembling. The immortal battle lion, who was 1,000,000 meters tall, was fighting against 4 immortal beings of the same level by himself. The battlefield covered thousands of kilometers. Almost half of the Starry River and the domain of the root of all evil was affected. The battle situation was too shocking. 5 undying level unmatched existences were fighting with everything they had, fighting to the death. This was a rhythm that was going to cause the void to collapse. In this vast and terrifying battlefield, the figures of the 5 undying old monsters could not be seen from the start. Boundless auras swept out, and even at the edge of the battlefield, if one was not careful, 1 or 2 sector lord level existences would be affected. The light ones would be injured, and the heavy ones would be stirred up. Chi whirled and killed. Body and soul were destroyed. Not even bones were left. Rumble, hua la. On the other side of the Netherworld Cauldron, the sound of thunder and chains that didn't stop suddenly became louder. Although the higher-ups of the various races of the second universe still had a few dozen immortal beings, except for the undying void pine that had revealed its true form and rooted its roots in the void, the others were all sector lords and universe-level warriors. They couldn't stop the 2 immortal beings from the punitive expedition team. Chapter 3907. Rumble. Kacha, kacha, thunderous booms resounded as the chains rattled. In the time it took to drink a cup of tea, only 9 of the 10,000 plus chains of talisman markings on the outer wall of the Netherworld furnace remained. At this point, the mission of the higher-ups of the various races in the second universe to descend on the source of all evil star field was basically a failure. The conquering camp formed by the various powers had finally cut off the channel that the dark furnace used to transport the liquid. Even though there were still 9 runic chains remaining, they were basically meaningless by themselves. Moreover, they would be blasted apart very soon. Howl. Howl, at this moment, for shocking roars came from the void. The sound was strange, not like that of flesh and blood life forms. It was sonorous, like the sound of metal clashing. In the next moment, in the void in different directions around the Netherworld furnace, 4 void cracks suddenly appeared out of thin air, and then 4 giant beasts stepped out of them. They were all Sector Lord level 9 perfection, also known as half-step universe level. If it were any other time, for half-step universe-level beings descending at the same time would definitely cause an uproar in an entire universe. But in this place, it really didn't count for much. In the current root of all evil star field, the undying level was the pinnacle, the universe level was only the core strength. Sector Lord level, even if it was a Sector Lord level 9 perfect, they weren't even worth mentioning. They could only follow behind to strengthen the momentum, acting as underlings. However, the arrival of these 4 half-step universe-level beasts immediately attracted the attention of all the great beings from both sides of the battlefield. Even the 2 undying beings from the expedition camp who were leading the great beings from both camps to attack the last 9 rune chains couldn't help but turn their heads to look at them. The life forms of these 4 giant beasts were extremely strange, and their actions were even more inconceivable. These 4 beasts weren't flesh and blood life forms, but mechanical life forms. This was because their bodies were basically made of the universe alloy used to build starry sky battleships. If it weren't for the fact that they looked like starry sky fortresses, the masters of the various major forces would have mistaken them for starry sky fortresses. These mechanical life forms were either members of the Heaven's Legacy race, but this was clearly impossible. The Heaven's Legacy race had long since gone into seclusion and migrated away. It was impossible for them to send 4 beast-like members of the Heaven's Legacy race to descend upon the root of all evil star domain to seize fortunes. That was no different from leaving clues, waiting for people to track down the whereabouts of their migration through these 4 alloy behemoths. Other than the Tianji race, there was only the automaton race, a mysterious race that belonged to the imperial preceptor of the Eternal Dynasty, D-Heir. Tianji and the mechanical race were essentially the same. They were both mechanical life forms. For the Tianji clan to become the overlord of the first universe, the entire human race had to ally with the various races of the second universe to form the Myriad Net Alliance. Only then would they be able to contend with the Tianji clan. Just this point alone was enough to show how powerful and terrifying the Tianji clan was. This time, instead of saying that they were hiding from the world, it would be better to say that they had other plans. A riot in the Celestial Legacy race's imperial prison was far from enough to make the Celestial Legacy race feel threatened and flee. Although the automaton race rarely appeared in the world and was restricted by the imperial preceptor of the Eternal Dynasty, D-Heir, they almost never appeared in front of the world. However, their existence was known to all 3 dimensions. From a certain point of view, the automaton race was actually far more mysterious than the Tianji clan. This time, the mysterious automaton race suddenly changed their usual style and sent 4 Sector Lord level 9 peak mechanical beasts to descend upon the root of all evil. This matter was truly thought-provoking. However, because this star field currently had an immortal rank Imperial clan elder from the Immortal Dynasty Elder Pavilion, and these 4 Sector Lord level mechanical ferocious beasts didn't do anything harmful, although the various experts were suspicious, they didn't take the initiative to provoke them. The moment the 4 mechanical beasts descended, they stared at the broken rune chains in the void. Kacha. Kacha kacha, the tooth-numbing sound of metal scraping resounded, quickly becoming louder and louder, causing all the experts who were watching to be dumbstruck, some even suspecting that they were hallucinating. In their line of sight, these 4 Sector Lord level 9 peak mechanical beasts actually didn't care about the underworld cauldron, each pulling on a broken rune chain and munching on it. These rune chains weren't simple. Even though they were broken, the originally complete runes on the chains lost their effectiveness, the energy field was destroyed and their power greatly decreased. However, just the material used to create them was definitely not simple. Even an undying would have to be serious in order to break them, a universe level would have to continuously attack them before they could break them. No matter what, it wouldn't be so easy to chew on them like sugar cane. However, the facts before their eyes spoke louder than words. These 4 half-step universe-level automaton beasts obviously had good teeth. When the leader of the automaton race, D-Heir, built their bodies, he gave them good teeth. It must have been made from some terrifying metal that was not inferior to the undying void gold. Otherwise, how could it have done this? On the other hand, it also proved one fact. That was these 4 mechanical beasts, coming to the source of all evil star field, their goal was most likely for the broken rune chains of the underworld cauldron. The mysterious metal used to create these rune chains was not ordinary. However, to the warriors of other races, it wasn't as important as the Tianji race or the automaton race. To the human race and the various races of the second universe, as well as the warriors of other life forms, if these rune chains were to be brought back, they would at most be used to create treasures or alloys to create battleships. They were after all external objects. However, the Tianji race and the automaton race could use them to strengthen themselves. These two races were automaton life forms. Their bodies were originally made from different materials. After many evolutions, they were finally able to create them. Hence, it was completely understandable that the automaton race would take this opportunity to send these four mechanical beasts to the source of all evil star field to steal these rune chains. The warriors were happy to go with the flow. In their eyes, although these rune chains made from mysterious metals were precious, they couldn't be compared to the all-evil origin liquid. As long as these four mechanical beasts didn't have any designs on the all-evil origin liquid, it would be fine. Under such circumstances, no one would provoke them. After all, the automaton race was essentially the same as the Tianji race, so they weren't to be trifled with. Their leader, D-Air, was the imperial teacher of the Undying Dynasty. They were basically in the same boat as the dynasty. Offending these four mechanical beasts was equivalent to offending both the automaton race and the undying dynasty of the human race. It was definitely a headache. If there wasn't an absolute conflict of interest, who would be willing to do such a thing? Kacha, Kacha. Chapter 3908. Kacha, Kacha, the teeth-numbing sound of metal rubbing against each other continued. After the four half-step universe-level mechanical ferocious beasts finished chewing the first rune chain, they turned around and started chewing on the second one. Without a doubt, their arrival was precisely for the sake of devouring this mysterious metal. The experts of the various powers saw all of this with their eyes, and they quickly paid no further attention to it. They withdrew their attention and turned their gazes towards the last 9 remaining runic chains at the bottom of the outer wall of the netherworld furnace. As long as the last 9 rune chains were broken, the channel and route through which the netherworld furnace transported the all-evil origin liquid would be completely sealed. Now, there were 4 half-step universe-level mechanical ferocious beasts from the machine race chewing on the broken rune chains in the void like sugarcane. This was a good thing. Even if the netherworld furnace itself or that terrifying heavenly Tao green I wanted to repair it, it was unlikely that it would be possible. The rune chains were only broken, so there was still a possibility of repair. If all of them were chewed up, then it would really be over. From this point of view, the powerful beings from all sides were actually quite happy to see the arrival of these 4 half-step universe-level mechanical ferocious beasts from the machine race. Of course, this was excluding the various races of the second universe. Wang, just as the 2 immortal-level old monsters were about to make a move on the remaining 9 rune chains, a weak buzzing sound suddenly rang out. The rune chains lit up. This time, it wasn't 9 chains but only 1. Furthermore, it was obvious that the all-evil origin liquid wasn't being transported from the inside of the netherworld furnace. This was because this rune chain should have lit up from one end of the netherworld furnace's outer wall and extended to the other end. The strange appearance of this rune chain before his eyes was clearly starting to light up from the end of his line of sight that had pierced into the unknown void. It gave off the feeling that there was a drop of the source of all evil in that unknown void that was being fed into the netherworld cauldron. However, that was obviously impossible. Clearly, there was a terrifying being chasing in the opposite direction of the rune chain. This runic chain was connected to the space on the other side, which was the ancestral land of the Blood Dragon clan in the second universe. The existence that was rapidly approaching along the chain was an energy avatar of the Blood Dragon clan's bloodline progenitor, the 9-headed Blood Dragon. Not long ago, when the 9-headed Blood Dragon heard the shocking news in the star area, the source of all evil, he realized that something unexpected was about to happen. Without hesitation, he immediately rushed over. Such a scene was not only playing out in the ancestral land of the Blood Wyrm tribe. Several other races in the top 10 races of the second universe also had an existence whose cultivation level had fallen to quasi-desolation. In the form of an energy clone, they followed the rune chains that supplied them with the all-evil origin liquid every year and angrily rushed to the star field of the source of all evil in the first universe. Go. For example, in the secret realm of the Cyan Rock clan's ancestral land, Ji Zhan, who was tens of thousands of meters long, rushed out. In the ancestral land of the Battle Lion clan, which was ranked third in the top 10 races of the second universe, there was a blood-colored two-headed battle lion roaring angrily at the sky. In the end, it also rushed into the rune chains in the form of an energy clone. In addition, there were also some ancient itinerant cultivators who had created an energy clone and followed the rune chains towards the star field of the source of all evil. Unfortunately, although they were ancient mighty beings, in terms of cultivation level and strength, they were many times stronger than the so-called immortal old monsters. However, on the one hand, they were heavily injured and had yet to recover. This time, they had descended with an energy clone. In addition, the way they rushed over was through the rune chains. Their speed was restricted by the rune chains. Although they were not slow, they were comparable to the Sector Lords, Universe Lords, and Universe Lords who directly tore through the void and descended. Compared to the Immortal Realm experts, they were clearly still slightly inferior. This directly led to some of the existences being forced to retreat midway because the runic chains were broken before they could arrive, cutting off the connection between them and the Netherworld Cauldron. Right now, there were only 9 rune chains left. There could only be 9 avatars of the ancient mighty beings who could rush over in this way. And now, the first one had clearly arrived with a rumbling sound. This scene shocked the 2 undying old monsters of the punitive expedition camp who were about to make a move, and they hesitated for a moment. The surrounding Sector Lord old monsters and Universe old monsters were even more surprised and bewildered, and vigilance appeared on their faces. For a moment, in the entire void, except for the 5 immortal old monsters who were fighting bloody battles and the 4 mechanical beasts from the Machine Clan who were chewing on the rune chains, almost all the other experts stopped what they were doing. Their eyes shone brightly as they locked onto the countless runes that were coming from the void. The other end lit up, and the chain that was rapidly spreading over, Walala. Walla, the sound of the chains grew louder and louder, and there was even a loud rumbling sound. In less than a breath of time, the runes that lit up on the chains had extended from the end of the void to the middle. They were not too far away from the Netherworld furnace, at most 10 million miles away. It was also at this moment that the entire Netherworld furnace, which was as huge as a star, began to shake violently without any warning. Within the chains that were rapidly extending towards the outer wall of the Netherworld furnace, there was even a monstrous murderous aura that began to wreak havoc. It swept across the sky, and its violent thoughts filled the sky, shocking this void. Even the 5 immortal old monsters of the 2 camps who were fighting bloody battles were alarmed. They all turned their heads and looked over, exclaiming in shock, "What happened? This aura? Quasi-ancient mighty beings? No, it should be the avatar of an ancient mighty being, ha ha ha, roar. Today, all of you will die. This is the aura of our bloodline ancestor, the 9-headed blood dragon. When the ancestor arrives, he will definitely crush everything." As the immortal old monsters exclaimed in shock, in the camp of the various races of the second universe, an old monster from the blood dragon clan was first stunned, then he suddenly raised his head and roared wildly. From the terrifying aura emitted by the rune chains, he keenly captured the aura of the bloodline ancestor of his clan. He instantly guessed the truth, and at this moment, he could be said to be wild with joy. Although the ancestor was about to arrive at this moment, it was only an energy avatar, and its cultivation level was not that of an ancient mighty being. Instead, it was 1 level lower. At most, it was at the quasi-ancient mighty level. But for this star field, which was the source of all evil, this was enough. In the eyes of a quasi-ancient mighty being, the so-called immortal old monsters were just ants, or even less than ants. Not to mention the universe level and sector lord level, they were not even worth a fart. Just the arrival of a quasi-ancient mighty being was enough to crush everyone. This vast star field would tremble because of this. Walala, Ing. Chapter 3909. In the second universe, the ancestral land of the Nether Turtle clan, the Nether Turtle Galaxy. Ever since the Void Tortoise was sent to the depths of the Nether Turtle Galaxy by the Headless Baby, the bloodline ancestor of the Nether Turtle clan had woken up and issued an order to seal off the entire Nether Turtle Galaxy. The order instantly resounded throughout the vast galaxy. The Nether Turtle Clan. Today, less than 3 days after the Nether Turtle Clan's sealing race's arrival, a faint rumble of thunder resounded from the Nether Turtle's secret realm in the Nether Turtle Galaxy's ancestral land. If one were to be in the Nether Turtle mysterious realm at that moment, they would see a giant turtle the size of a planet in the void. It was the bloodline ancestor of the Nether Turtle Clan. In the surrounding void, more senior members of the Nether Furnace clan could be vaguely seen. They were at least at the Sector Lord level. The Nether Turtle clan's old ancestor that Yi Xian had seen was one of them. However, his strength was far from the peak Star Lord level that he had shown before. He was at the immortal level. However, this included the Nether Turtle clan's ancestor and the Nether Turtle clan's bloodline primordial ancestor that was enormous like a star. At this moment, all of them seemed as if they were worshipping someone, and they were looking extremely respectfully towards a certain direction as if they were listening to someone's teachings. Yes, they were worshipping and listening to a lesson. In front of the gazes of all the higher-ups of the Dark Turtle clan was a terrifying giant turtle that was as large as half a region of stars. It was crouching in space, and there was a terrifying wound on its back. Even the Nether Turtle clan's bloodline ancestor, whose body was as large as a planet, was insignificant in front of it. That terrifying giant turtle was the Void Tortoise that had been sent to the Nether Turtle Galaxy a few days ago. And now, its terrifying body, which was the size of half a planetary region, was the result of deliberately shrinking it. Otherwise, if it fully revealed its true form, a single claw of the Void Tortoises would be the size of a planetary region. That primordial creature was one of the most terrifying creatures in the history of the universe. At that moment, his injuries were far from healed, and so was his strength. Even though he had obtained the light that the headless baby shot into his body, there was still a long way to go before he could fully recover. His strength had only just entered the primordial supreme level, and he was far from reaching the peak of the primordial supreme level at his peak. Even so, it was more than enough for the Void Tortoise to do what it needed to do after it entered the supreme of the ancients level. It's inconvenient for those old fogies to interfere in this matter. Only I, the old turtle, will take the risk. An elderly voice that was filled with a weak aura seemed to have come from the end of space, yet it was extremely clear and resounded in the minds of all the higher-ups of the Dark Turtle clan. The insides of the Netherworld Cauldron have been tampered with. Although it has evolved once again and given birth to an artifact spirit, the Netherworld Cauldron's artifact spirit was affected by everything that happened in the Netherworld Cauldron. It won't activate the warning array formation or contact the Heavenly Tao's green eye, therefore, as long as you are careful, there won't be much danger. You can rest assured that Old Tortoise will return soon. Don't delay any longer. Hand over the coordinates of the ancient demonic bear's hibernation. Old Tortoise can't rush there from here, so I can only go somewhere else. Otherwise, if I leave behind any traces and the Heavenly Tao's green eye comes to find me, the entire Dark Turtle clan will be annihilated. This was the only thing the Void Tortoise was worried about. Fortunately, there was a solution. The Dark Turtle clan happened to know a place where an ancient demonic bear was hibernating and enjoying the secondary source of the Netherworld Cauldron's chain. Above that place, a Netherworld Cauldron's chain was suspended. Every year, a drop of all evil origin liquid would drip from the end of this chain. Whoosh! A faint whistling sound rang out as a beam of cyan light shot out from the Star Tortoise's body, heading towards the Void Tortoise. It was the coordinates of the unknown void where the desolate demonic bear was. Rip. After the green brilliance entered the Void Tortoise's body, the Void Tortoise merely moved its claw, and the Void Tortoise's secret realm was torn apart. Its body turned into a ray of light and disappeared into it in a flash. When it reappeared, it was already in another star field that was extremely far away from the Dark Turtle star field. The Void Tortoise wiped away the traces of the Void Tortoise behind it, raised its claw again, and tore apart the Void Tortoise again. This time, it was going to the first universe. Interplanar travel was child's play for the Void Tortoise, who had the cultivation of the Primordial Supreme. There was no need to rely on wormholes at all. After doing this several times, the Void Tortoise had almost circled all 3 universes. When it tore apart the Void Tortoise for the last time, a green light flashed on its forehead. This time, it was heading to the mysterious unknown void where the ancient demonic bear was. It was a dark void without a trace of light. All the stars in the void were completely dim. The energy in the star cores had been completely absorbed by the ancient demonic bear. The ancient demonic bear had the power to control the earth and its bloodline. It was said that in the vast universe, as long as there were stars, the demonic bear of the earth was indestructible. No matter how severely injured it was, when it landed on the surface of a star, it could instantly absorb all the vitality of an entire star through the contact of its feet. This included the plants and life on the star, and even the vitality of the star itself. The reason why this mysterious void was so dark was because all the stars in the void had been sucked dry of their energy. The life force of the stars had been absorbed by the desolate demonic bear to heal its injuries. The supply of 1 drop of all evil origin liquid every year was obviously far from enough for it. Its injuries were too severe. The ancient demonic bear belonged to the opposing camp in the great battle back then. At its peak, it was at the mid-stage of the primordial era. The standard set by the Eye of the Heavenly Tao for an existence of this level was to have the netherworld furnace supply 1 drop of all evil origin liquid every year. No matter how severe its injuries were, that was all there was to it. Its value was nothing more than that. At the highest point in the center of the void tortoise was a rune chain that was 1,000 feet long. It abruptly passed through the void tortoise and hung at the highest point in the sky. Below the rune chain was a giant gray bear that was 10,000 feet in size curled up in the void. It looked extremely weak, and there was a huge hole in its abdomen from which grayish-gold blood was still flowing out. Its aura had long fallen to the level of a quasi-primordial era almighty. As the faint sound of something breaking through the air rang out, the giant void tortoise that had turned into a ray of light descended upon this unknown void. It immediately revealed its true form. Of course, it was not a complete form, but even so, it almost filled up the entire void tortoise. Chapter 39:10. Why? A supreme being like you shouldn't pay special attention to an insignificant enemy general like me. He had been dormant for countless years and was still injured. Not to mention that he was in the middle stage of the primordial era when he was at his peak. He was still some time away from even reaching the level of a supreme being of the primordial era. However, at this moment, a supreme being of the enemy camp had found him and wanted to kill him in person. This was not only frustrating for this primordial demonic bear, but it was also puzzling. He knew that he was going to die today. The void tortoise's ferocious name had shaken the universe in the desolation era. Although it wasn't at its peak state, it was still a supreme desolation. This level of strength could crush a demonic bear who was not even a supreme being of the primordial era. It was much easier than crushing an ant. He was unwilling, but he could only accept his fate. At the last moment of his life, he asked the question in his heart. Actually, it's nothing. You don't have to worry about it. This old tortoise is a little constipated recently, so I want to kill some people. Just take it as a way to vent my anger. After saying that, the void tortoise raised his right forelimb and pressed into the void. Roar, boom. The primordial demonic bear was enraged. Crazy light shot out of his eyes as if he was going to explode himself. Unfortunately, he was not even a supreme being of the primordial era. He was not qualified to do that in front of a supreme being of the primordial era. As the void tortoise gently pressed its right forelimb, the primordial demonic ape's huge body instantly exploded into a cloud of blood mist. Not even a hair was left behind. Wang! With a buzzing sound, a shadow rushed out of the void tortoise's body. It was an energy doppelganger. Although it was only a doppelganger, it still had the strength of a supreme being of the primordial era. After all, the void tortoise had recovered to the early stage of the supreme being of the primordial era. As soon as this energy doppelganger appeared, it rushed into the rune chain hanging at the top of the mysterious void and followed the chain to the source of all evil star area. The demonic emperor planet. Yi Xian had been paying close attention to the situation in the root of all evil star region. Although he didn't enter the origin of all evil star area, the demon race had sent several star fortresses to guard in the distant void outside the origin of all evil star area. Once something happened inside, the star fortresses would report back to the demon emperor planet at once. Unfortunately, when this star region was chosen by the Eye of the Heaven Tao to be the location of the netherworld furnace refinement formation, the entire source of all evil had been isolated by a formation barrier. It was utterly impossible to see what was happening inside from the outside. No matter how big the commotion inside was, it wouldn't spread beyond the source of all evil star field in a short time. The Demonkin scouts didn't dare to enter the source of all evil star field because of the strict order. So up until now, Yi Xian was completely in the dark about what was happening in this star region. He didn't know anything. Just as Yi Xian was feeling a little uneasy, the left side of his chest suddenly became hot. A message came from his chest and rushed into his brain. Yi Xian was gradually getting used to the headless infant corpse communicating with him in this way. What surprised him was that this time, the message sent by the headless infant corpse was very simple. It only had a few words: enter the source of all evil star area, immediately. What's going on? Didn't they say that there might be an ambush this time? Didn't they tell him not to get involved? Why did it change so suddenly? Yi Xian was stunned and felt a little confused. But he soon felt relieved. Since the headless infant corpse had spoken, what was there to worry about? With him here, even if the eye of heaven really came, at least he could guarantee Yi Xian's safety. However, according to Yi Xian's speculation, the headless infant corpse wouldn't let Yi Xian see the eye of heaven easily. At least, it wouldn't do so before he and the forces under his command fully developed. That would do Yi Xian no good. Now that the headless infant corpse was still parasitic in his body, what was bad for Yi Xian was bad for him. Why would the headless infant corpse do that? Vaguely, he guessed that the headless infant corpse must have made some secret arrangements. He was sure that was why it reminded him to immediately enter the source of all evil star field. As for what to do after entering, the headless infant corpse didn't say, and Yi Xian was too lazy to ask. He would just act according to the circumstances. In short, he was going to take advantage of the situation. Yi Xian didn't hesitate. After greeting the Demon King Mo Wen Tian, he immediately activated the interstellar coordinate jump ability attached to the system title and locked on to the source of all evil, the source of all evil star field. Walala, roar. Under the dumbfounded gazes of the experts from all sides, the runes suddenly lit up, and the chain that was rapidly spreading towards the netherworld furnace made a strange crashing sound again, followed by an incomparably clear and terrifying dragon roar. The next moment, a blood-colored nine-headed blood dragon that was only 10,000 feet long rushed out of the rune chain. It was the energy clone of the Blood Dragon clan's bloodline ancestor, the nine-headed blood dragon. During the Primordial War, the nine-headed blood dragon belonged to the opposing faction, the Eye of Heaven's camp. At its peak, its cultivation was at the late stage of the Primordial era, slightly stronger than the primordial demonic bear that had just been killed by the void giant turtle. But now, its injuries had not healed, and its cultivation was only at the early stage of the primordial era. Right now, it was in the form of an energy clone that was following the rune chain. Therefore, this descending energy clone's cultivation was only at the level of the primordial era. But even so, it was enough to crush all the experts of both camps in the source of all evil star field. Even the undying old monsters were just ants in front of the primordial era. Such a terrifying supreme existence had descended on their camp, and the higher-ups of the various races in the second universe were wild with joy. So what if there were 6 undying old monsters in the conquering camp? They were still destined to fall here. Even if the 6 undying old monsters joined forces, they would definitely not be a match for this 9-headed blood dragon clone of the primordial era. They would be killed like ants. As for those below the undying realm, those at the universe level and sector lord level were nothing. They were not even qualified to be ants. In their opinion, this terrifying existence that had unexpectedly descended on their camp would immediately unleash his invincible power and completely annihilate all the experts in the conquering camp in a short time. As a matter of fact, the eyes of the 9-headed blood dragon that had just descended had indeed emitted a cold, murderous aura at the beginning. However, as his 9 heads swept around and clearly saw the situation around the netherworld furnace and the entire star field, this murderous aura instantly condensed. Chapter 39:11. During the Primordial War, the 9-headed blood flood dragon belonged to the opposing faction, the Heavenly Dao's Green Eyes faction. At his peak, his cultivation base was at the late-stage primordial era, slightly stronger than the primordial demonic bear that had just been killed by the void giant tortoise. Now, although his injuries had yet to heal, and his main body's cultivation base was only at the early-stage primordial era, it was still enough to ignore all the existences gathered in the root of all evil star domain. The strongest among the 200 or so patriarchs was only at the immortal realm. In his eyes, they were not even considered ants. He originally wanted to make a move and at least kill the 100 or so opposing faction experts who coveted the Netherworld Furnace's fortune in one fell swoop. But now, his attention was attracted by the chains that were transporting the all-evil origin liquid out of the Netherworld Furnace. There were originally more than 10,000 of these chains, and each chain could only obtain 1 to 3 or 4 drops of all-evil origin liquid every year. But now, all the other chains had been broken, and there were only 9 rune chains left on the outer wall of the Netherworld Furnace. This made the 9-headed blood flood dragon excited. This was definitely a heaven-defying benefit. In front of such benefits, he instantly forgot his original intentions for descending this time. The 100 or so ants still lingering in the root of all evil star domain were naturally ignored by him. With him here, no matter how many of these ants there were, they would not be able to cause any waves. To him, the most important thing now was how to deal with the other 8 rune chains. He was not sure if the total amount of products delivered by the Netherworld Furnace would remain the same even if the number of chains decreased drastically. Assuming that there were 10,000 drops of all evil origin liquid in the Netherworld Furnace, and there were 10,000 chains, then 1 drop would be distributed to each chain. But if the number of chains decreased drastically, for example, there were only 10 chains left, then there would be 2 possibilities for how the Netherworld Furnace would distribute the products. One was that all the all-evil origin liquid would be transported out, and each of the 10 chains would obtain 1,000 drops of all-evil origin liquid. This was equivalent to snatching all the supplies from the other chains and gathering them together. The other possibility was that the remaining 10 chains would still be in the usual ratio of 1 drop per chain, and the excess evil origin elixir would be stored in the Netherworld Cauldron. For the 9-headed blood dragon, he naturally hoped that the situation would be the first one. In that case, the unforeseen event in the Netherworld Furnace would actually help him. However, he had no confidence in this matter. He was not sure at all. But even if there was only a 1 in 10,000 chance, it was worth it. However, 9 chains was still too many. Assuming that 10,000 drops of origin liquid were divided into 9, each chain would only be able to transport a little over 1,000 drops. It was far from enough to completely heal his injuries. This sort of fortuitous encounter was too hard to come by, and no matter who it was, they would strive to maximize the benefits. Because it was practically certain that if they missed this opportunity, there would absolutely be no other opportunity. There would never be another opportunity like this in the future. Therefore, 9 chains were really too many. If he could break a few more of the rune chains, once this gamble succeeded, the benefits he would reap would be even more shocking. It was precisely because of this that the 9-headed blood dragon instantly disregarded all the other existences in this star field. At this moment, his entire mind was drawn in by the other 8 chains. It was as if he was possessed. The enormous benefits that could be said to be terrifying even caused his breathing to quicken. All of this seemed to take a long time to describe, but in fact, it was merely a thought that flashed through the 9-headed blood dragon's mind in the blink of an eye. Immediately after, he wanted to make a move. He wanted to break as many of the other 8 rune chains as possible. This was originally something that could be done with a raise of his hand. However, just as he was about to make a move, 2 of the chains suddenly trembled violently. The clanking of the chains resounded through the void. At the end of the void, the obscure runes etched on the 2 chains suddenly lit up and rapidly spread toward the Netherworld Furnace. In the blink of an eye, more than half of the chains had been broken. Roar. Screech, a furious roar and a ruthless howl. Both of their auras were astonishing. They were not weaker than the aura of the energy doppelganger of the 9-headed blood dragon. Before the furious roar and the ruthless howl ended, 2 figures had already rushed out from the 2 rune chains that were almost completely lit up. One was a cyan rock with a wingspan of tens of thousands of feet, and the other was a blood-red double-headed war lion. Although they were both in the state of energy doppelganger, their auras were not weaker than the nine-headed blood dragons. They were both powerful figures of the Desolation era. The bloodline primordial ancestors of the Cyan Rock clan and the War Lion clan, which were among the top 3 clans in the second universe, had finally arrived with their doppelganger. When they saw this scene, the nine-headed blood WIRM that was about to sever all the other 8 talisman markings chains and fight for the great fortune that might only exist, instantly stopped their actions, and a wisp of pity flashed in the eyes of all 9 heads. In the end, he was still one step too slow. If he had another breath of time, he could have broken all the other 8 rune chains. The 2 bloodline primordial ancestors of the Cyan Rock clan and the War Lion clan would have been forced back to the ancestral land of their clans midway. Because the connection between the chains and the netherworld furnace was cut off, some kind of order would be disrupted. They would not be able to descend along this way, but it was too late to say anything now. There were no ifs in this world. With a sigh in his heart, the nine-headed blood dragon could only settle for the next best thing. The eyes of all 9 heads converged on the other 6 rune chains. As long as he could sever these 6 rune chains, and if the sliver of possibility that he had won really became a reality, then the large amount of all evil origin liquid within the netherworld furnace would only be divided into 3 portions. It was barely acceptable. The Cyan Rock and the double-headed War Lion had just arrived, so they did not understand the situation here. However, they clearly felt a strong murderous intent just now. Moreover, it had a familiar aura, which belonged to their old friend, the nine-headed blood dragon. It was precisely because of this that vigilance appeared in the eyes of the Azure Sky Rock and two-headed War Lion as soon as they descended, and they stared intently at the nine-headed blood WIRM. They similarly ignored the 100-plus ancestors of the various clans that were stunned in the surrounding space. In the eyes of the Cyan Rock and the double-headed War Lion, they were just ants. The space was deathly silent. Only the 4 mechanical ferocious beasts from the Machine Clan seemed to be completely oblivious to everything that was happening in the surrounding space, and they were still ceaselessly nibbling away at the talisman markings chains with unrelenting delight. Following the gaze of the 9-headed blood dragon, the Cyan Rock and the double-headed War Lion also landed on the last 6 rune chains. They were all powerful figures of the primordial era, and they were all beneficiaries of the benefits of the netherworld furnace. These 3 old fellows originally had the same standpoint and mindset. Chapter 39:12. Whoosh. With a faint sound, Yi Xian's figure appeared in the central region of the source of all evil. The interstellar coordinates that he had left behind in the star region of the source of all evil were imprinted in the central region's buffer zone. Although the current star region of the source of all evil was divided into the outer region, the central region's buffer zone, and the core region, and the barrier between the 3 regions had been opened last time, Yi Xian had imprinted the interstellar coordinates. The location of the coordinates would not change. The netherworld furnace was originally deep in the core region of this star region, so the area in front of him where the aura was surging was still far away from Yi Xian. Even so, he could still feel the austere and oppressive aura. In fact, with the cultivation strength of the 9-headed blood dragon, the Azure Sky Rock, and the 2-headed battle lion, the divine consciousness could completely cover the entire star region of the source of all evil. But at this moment, all of their attention was on the netherworld furnace, including the high-level ancestors of the various large clans and top forces from the 3 major dimensions. So, as soon as Yi Xian appeared, no one noticed him at all. In fact, to be safe, Yi Xian had already activated the perfect vibration of the spiritual power secret technique before activating the interstellar coordinate jump ability. His aura and figure were perfectly hidden. But with his current cultivation strength, even if he fully activated the perfect vibration of the spiritual power secret technique, he could not escape the active detection of the quasi-primordial powerhouses. So, the moment his figure appeared in the center of the star region of the source of all evil, Yi Xian's left chest suddenly burned, and a green brilliance flashed and enveloped his whole body, then he completely disappeared. The headless infant corpse attacked again. With the protection of his power, not to mention the quasi-primordial powerhouses, even if the primordial powerhouses or the supreme primordial powerhouses were here, they would not be able to see Yi Xian at all, and would not be able to sense his existence. Unless the consciousness doppelganger of the heavenly Tao's green eye came. But for this, the headless infant corpse had obviously made arrangements, and was sure that the other party would not come in a short time. When his figure and aura completely disappeared, Yi Xian calmed down. After taking a deep breath, he no longer hesitated and shot toward the dark cauldron at top speed. Soon, Yi Xian arrived at the depths of the root of all evil star field. He could see everything in front of him. Since his aura and figure were completely concealed by the power of the headless infant corpse, no one sensed his arrival. The appearance of the three quasi-desolate ancient supreme beings shocked Yi Xian, but his gaze immediately fell onto the netherworld furnace. When he saw that the tens of thousands of rune chains that were transporting the all-evil origin liquid to the outside of the netherworld furnace had almost all been broken, Yi Xian's heart suddenly relaxed. He had planned all of this for a reason. It was this kind of situation. Now that he had basically achieved his goal, he was naturally happy. However, the last 9 rune chains were really a headache. As long as these 9 rune chains were not broken, the benefits that Yi Xian had planned for this time could not be considered stable. This was because even he was not sure whether the all-evil origin elixir in the dark cauldron would be transported to the 9 rune chains according to its original distribution after all the other rune chains were broken, or would it be transported out along the remaining 9 rune chains. However, there were already 3 vigorous quasi-desolation experts in the area where the 9 rune chains were. Even if Yi Xian was unwilling, he could not take action to resolve this matter on his own. If that happened, he would definitely be exposed. However, there were so many terrifying quasi-desolation experts in this star domain at the source of all evil, and there were only 9 rune chains left for the dark cauldron to transport the all-evil origin elixir. Yi Xian believed that they would not disappoint him. His gaze quickly moved away from the dark cauldron because he had analyzed that the headless infant corpse had sent him to the source of all evil, definitely not because of the 9 rune chains. It was even more impossible that the headless infant corpse wanted him to seize the opportunity to obtain the good fortune in the dark cauldron. There was no hurry at all. Once the rune chains broke, he could go back at any time. Implement this matter. Yi Xian's gaze quickly locked onto the 3 quasi-universe level mechanical ferocious beasts. There was no other way. Among all the great beings present, apart from the 3 quasi-desolation experts, they were the most eye-catching. These are mechanical life forms? A dim light flashed in Yi Xian's eyes, and a look of surprise appeared on his face. He saw the essence of these 3 mechanical ferocious beasts. At the same time, he made a connection in his mind. To be able to send out 4 quasi-universe level mechanical ferocious beasts, one could imagine their background. It was either DE or D-Air. The former was the leader of the Tianji clan, while the latter was the leader of the Automaton clan. Regardless of which possibility it was, Yi Xian was very interested. If it was the former, Yi Xian could very likely track down the current whereabouts of the Tianji clan through these 3 quasi-universe level mechanical ferocious beasts. If it was the latter, he could more or less understand some information related to the Automaton clan. It should be known that although the devouring system in his body was created by the technological pioneer of the human clan, Xing Bo had been plotted against and killed by DE. These seeds of the devouring system had actually been spread by D-Air. Regardless of whether it was D-Air, who had become the imperial teacher of the everlasting dynasty, or the entire Automaton clan under his command, which had almost never appeared in the world, they were all more mysterious than the Tianji clan. It could be said that, from a certain perspective, Yi Xian even hoped that these 3 quasi-universe level mechanical ferocious beasts were from the Automaton clan. In fact, this was more likely because the Tianji clan had already moved away from the world. No matter how amazing the creation of the netherworld furnace was, it was impossible for DE to reveal such an obvious flaw and openly send out a few quasi-universe level mechanical ferocious beasts in front of the world. In addition, the way these 3 quasi-universe level mechanical ferocious beasts engulfed the rune chains was indeed a little strange, so Yi Xian could not help but think more about it. Now, he was basically sure of one thing, and that was that the reason the headless infant corpse had suddenly reminded him to come to the root of all evil star field was probably because of these quasi-universe level mechanical ferocious beasts. Yi Xian was on the Demon Emperor planet, so he had no way of knowing what was happening in the root of all evil star field. However, this did not mean that the headless infant corpse was the same. Either he had left some sort of backup plan here, related to some special information transmission channel, or he was proficient in some sort of heaven-defying deduction method. For example, the heaven measuring technique of the old devil mosquito butcher seemed to be quite extraordinary, so there was no reason that an existence at the level of the headless infant corpse would not know about this. Of course, to Yi Xian, the reason was actually completely unimportant. What was important was everything in front of him. However, the situation in front of him was obviously a little chaotic. Even if Yi Xian wanted to make a move, he had to find the best opportunity to do so. Muttering to himself, he chose to lie low for the time being and wait for the right opportunity. After the azure sky rock and the two-headed battle lion understood everything, the three supreme existences at the quasi-primordial level merely exchanged a glance and reached a consensus. Chapter 39:13. Originally, there was no suspense at all. When the three great beings of the quasi-desolation attacked, it was only 6 rune chains. Without the self-defense of the netherworld furnace and the descent of the consciousness of the heavenly Tao's green eye to interfere, it was as easy as blowing off dust. However, right at this moment, a shocking change occurred again. Walala, roar. Among the 9 remaining rune chains, the 4th chain lit up again. At the end of the void, the rune engraved on the surface of the chain lit up instantly. This time, the speed was faster, and it spread to the end of the chain in an instant. At this point, the strange sound shook the sky, and the aura emitted by this chain was even more terrifying, making one's heart tremble. Even the 9-headed blood dragon, the cyan sky rock, and the 2-headed war lion, who had arrived one after another, widened their eyes at this moment. White hairs appeared on their backs, and their hands were about to attack, but halfway, they all stopped. In the next instant, the chains rattled as the enormous cauldron rumbled and shook the heavens. Along with this, the furious roar of a Qilin resounded through the sky, and it shook the entire expanse of space in the root of all evil to the point of shaking. Immediately after, a huge figure of 100,000 feet darted out from the rune chains and rushed into the sky. The aura of a great being from the primordial era swept through the world, and the surrounding void trembled inch by inch, as if it could collapse at any time. The more than 100 great beings of the ancestor level from both sides, who were originally in a daze in the void, were all horrified, and they all retreated rapidly, retreating into the distance. Only the 4 half-step universe-level mechanical ferocious beasts from the automaton race were still engrossed in devouring the rune chains as before. However, this aura was too terrifying. In just a moment, the mechanical ferocious beast closest to the netherworld furnace had completely exploded and was completely annihilated. Even so, the other 3 seemed to be unaware and continued to devour. Boom! Boom! Several earth-shattering explosions were heard, and a part of the alloy bodies of the 3 mechanical ferocious beasts exploded, about 1/3 of them. However, as a green light flashed in the wreckage, this situation was instantly interrupted. Some kind of amazing defensive array was left in the bodies of the 3 alloy ferocious beasts. At this time, it was activated and finally resisted the terrifying aura of a great being from the primordial era. Kacha kacha, crisp sounds continued as the talisman markings chains were still being nibbled away, and this scene caused everyone to be speechless. The 100+ ancestors from both sides that had already retreated to the distant space looked at each other, and their expressions carried a strange expression amidst their astonishment. This time, it was none other than the Scarlet Unicorn who had come to the root of all evil star region with the 9 gloom demon crocodile. A supreme being level energy clone finally arrived, hovering above the core of this star area, looking around disdainfully. The pressure was terrifying. After all, this was the will of a primordial paragon. Even though it was a primordial paragon who had been injured for countless years and had yet to fully recover, it was still a primordial paragon. However, a supreme being was still a supreme being. Even if he wasn't in his best condition, that formless pressure was still terrifying. Within a radius of 10,000 miles around him, everything was under his control. With a single thought, flowers bloomed and wilted, stars were born and stars fell. Although this primordial paragon wasn't as powerful as the void tortoise, his cultivation had reached the mid-stage of the primordial paragon when he was in his peak condition. Now, his injuries had yet to fully recover, and his original body had just recovered to the peak of the primordial paragon. This energy clone that had followed the talisman markings chains of the netherworld furnace to this place was only at the early stage of the primordial paragon. Even so, it was far more powerful than the 9-headed blood dragon, the azure sky rock, and the 2-headed battle lion that had arrived before him. The situation instantly became tense, and it was simply suffocating. Among the energy clones of the 4 supreme existences, one of them had reached the early stage of the primordial paragon, and the other 3 were quasi-primordial paragons. 1 against 3, the strong against the weak. There was a boundless murderous intent in the air. The entire space was completely stagnant at this moment, and the atmosphere was so oppressive that it was horrifying. Before this energy clone of the Scarlet Unicorn appeared, it had clearly sensed the chilling killing intent from the 9-headed blood dragon, the azure sky rock, and the 2-headed battle lion. At this moment, as soon as it arrived, its aura was locked onto these 3 quasi-primordial paragons. Its aura was cold, and it had a sign that it would attack at any time. In the battle of the primordial paragon, although they belonged to the same camp and were all generals under the heavenly eye of the heavens, they weren't familiar with each other. After all, they weren't on the same level at all. The Scarlet Unicorn was the primordial paragon back then. Whereas the 9-headed blood dragon, the azure sky rock, and the 2-headed battle lion were merely primordial paragons. The difference between them was equivalent to a commander and a general. Back then, the heavenly eye of the heavens obviously had a lot of commanders at the primordial paragon level. The 9-headed blood dragon and the others weren't under the command of the Scarlet Unicorn, so it was even more impossible for them to have any interaction with each other. Moreover, now was the later generation after the passage of countless years. Everything back then had already gone with the wind, and the so-called comrades in arms basically didn't exist anymore. As the primordial paragon, it was provoked by 3 little generals who were merely primordial paragons back then. If it had come a little later, the other party might have even attacked. To the Scarlet Unicorn, the 9-headed blood dragon, the azure sky rock, and the 2-headed battle lion's actions were tantamount to offending the heavens' might. Do you want to die? Or with the merciless passage of time, you've long forgotten my supreme ferocious might back then? Roar! The Scarlet Unicorn wasn't in a hurry to kill the 3 quasi-primordial paragons in front of it right away. Although the 9-headed blood dragon, the azure sky rock, and the 2-headed battle lion weren't like ants to it, in fact, they weren't much better. Even though quasi-primordial paragons were only quasi-primordial paragons when compared to true primordial paragons, the gap between their cultivations and abilities was no different than the gap between the heavens and the earth. The Scarlet Unicorn had a proud expression as it spoke coldly, and its tone revealed dense indifference and laziness. Not too long ago, it had descended to the root of all evil out of rage because of being schemed against. How long had it been since then? A similar incident had actually occurred once more. This time, the talisman marking chains that transported the product of the nether furnace, the evil liquid, had almost been severed into 2. This was an absolutely unforgivable crime to the Scarlet Unicorn. These 3 ancient existences at the quasi-primordial paragon's level before it had already been decided by it, and it had secretly announced the outcome of their deaths. But before that, it still needed to rely on these 3 fellows to fiercely deter the coveting gazes that were concealed in the shadows. Otherwise, if a similar incident were to occur once more, then wouldn't it be exhausting for its life? After all, it couldn't stay here for long because it was too dangerous. So, the Scarlet Unicorn had to make an example to others, and the 9-headed blood dragon, azure sky rock, and 2-headed battle lion before it were its prey. Chapter 39:14. Judging from the Scarlet Unicorn's words, it was clear that it wanted to kill the 3 of them as an example to others. The faces of the 9-headed blood dragon, the azure sky rock, and the 2-headed battle lion instantly turned gloomy. Although they only had the strength of a powerful figure from the primordial age and were indeed weaker than the Scarlet Unicorn who was in the early stage of the primordial age, they had once stood on the throne of the powerful figures and stood proudly in the primordial age. Now, they were being treated like this by the Scarlet Unicorn in front of a group of ants of the later generations. How could they endure this? This was simply a blatant humiliation that they couldn't accept no matter what. The 9-headed blood dragon, the azure sky rock, and the two-headed battle lion exchanged glances, and their gazes fell on the last 5 rune chains one after another. They suppressed the resentment in their hearts and spoke in a low voice. "Fellow cultivator, there is no grudge between us. Now that the situation is like this, just now, if it were you, you would have done the same thing." "That's right. The 5 rune chains may descend on other powerful figures at any time. Perhaps the next one will be a supreme primordial age." In other words, it was reminding the Scarlet Unicorn not to only care about showing off. The interests in front of them were the most important. Although you are a powerful figure from the primordial age, the other 5 rune chains may descend on existences of the same level as you at any time, or even stronger. At the same time, it was tantamount to another kind of hint. The 9-headed blood dragon, the azure sky rock, and the 2-headed battle lion were expressing their goodwill, indicating that they could join forces. In this way, even if the next 5 rune chains really had a powerful figure from the primordial age, with their help, the Scarlet Unicorn could definitely suppress the opponent. Once the Scarlet Unicorn nodded and acknowledged this kind of surrender, there was more than a 90% chance that he wouldn't suddenly turn against them and kill the 9-headed blood dragon, the azure sky rock, and the 2-headed battle lion. The Supreme Primordial Age had the pride of a Supreme Primordial Age. The 3 of them were well aware of this point. In fact, what they were most eager to see now was an existence that was not weaker than the Scarlet Unicorn suddenly descend from one of the rune chains. In this way, even if the Scarlet Unicorn didn't listen to them, they could very well side with the newly descended Supreme Primordial Age and deal with the Scarlet Unicorn together. At that time, the 3 Supreme Primordial Age existences were no different from rare goods, because basically no matter which side they sided side. The Unicorn's chances of victory. Unicorns Azure Sky Rock, the Azure Sky Rock, and the 2-headed battle lion, but it was obviously not moved was Unicorn was to them. But it was obviously that was not to them. But it was obviously, it was not to them, but it, SSS, but it was not twos. But Unicorn, Azure Sky Rock, and the 2-headed battle lion. Unicorn, it, the rock. Its cultivation strength had now been restored to the peak of the Supreme Primordial Age, and the Scarlet Unicorn was sure that it was basically impossible for there to be a Supreme Primordial Age alive in this world. Or it could be said that the Supreme Primordial Age who had been restored was at most the same as itself, restored to the peak of the Supreme Primordial Age. If that was the case, this kind of existence would come along the rune chains in the form of an energy doppelganger. The doppelganger's strength would at most be at the early stage of the Supreme Primordial Age, which belonged to the same level as itself. As long as there was no interference from the 3 Supreme Primordial Age existences in front of it, the Scarlet Unicorn was not at all in a battle of the same level. He was not afraid of anyone. In other words, even if there was a Supreme Primordial Age expert descending now, what the Scarlet Unicorn had to do was to kill the 9-headed blood dragon, the Azure Sky Rock, and the 2-headed battle lion immediately, completely eliminating the hidden danger. The 9-headed blood dragon and the 2-headed battle lion did not expect him to have such thoughts at all. That was because they did not understand the Scarlet Unicorn at all. But from his words at this moment, the 9-headed blood dragon, the Azure Sky Rock, and the 2-headed battle lion could tell that he refused to surrender. He even ridiculed them for not being as strong as the Supreme Primordial Age expert. The bearing and majesty of the Supreme Primordial Age expert. This was the rhythm of not being able to reach an agreement. The 9-headed blood dragon, the Azure Sky Rock, and the 2-headed battle lion exchanged glances again, and the aura in their bodies instantly became fierce. Now, they could only fight to the death. In that case, we can only fight. It's not like we haven't reached the level of the Supreme Primordial Age expert before, it's useless to say more. If you want to fight, then, let's fight. Roar. The 3 Supreme Primordial Age existences roared at the same time, and the aura in their bodies surged endlessly. In the blink of an eye, their bodies, which were originally about 10,000 feet tall, all soared 100 times, reaching 10,000 feet tall. One of them was the 9-headed blood dragon, whose entire body was blood red, and each of its scales was like a towering mountain peak. Its aura was extremely violent, and the entire void trembled slightly under this violent pressure. One of them was the Azure Sky Rock, whose entire body was green. Every feather was the same, and there were no other colors. When it slightly spread its wings, the void of the universe seemed like it was about to shatter inch by inch. Among the 3 half-step universe-level mechanical ferocious beasts that were engrossed in gnawing on the rune chains, one of them was slightly closer to the azure sky rock, and it was slightly scratched by the fierce aura that surged out when it spread its wings. In an instant, there was an ear-piercing sound of metal rubbing against each other. There was no violent explosion, but the entire body of the half-step universe-level mechanical ferocious beast disintegrated in an instant. Its huge body cracked inch by inch, and in the blink of an eye, it died an unnatural death. The last one was a 2-headed giant lion with 2 gigantic, ferocious beast heads. Its entire body was blood red, and it revealed a touch of unusual color. There was an endless amount of blood-red fog that spread out from its body, and in the blink of an eye, it covered a part of the void, covering the entire body of this gigantic 2-headed giant lion. Its entire body was shrouded, and not a single trace of it could be seen. The bloodline power of this 2-headed war lion was clearly not only ferocious and battle-thirsty. Just from this illusory blood-red fog, it could be seen that it was most likely proficient in some kind of bewitching ability, which could create illusions during battle and severely injure the opponent. Are you all trying to resist? You're really making me laugh to death. 3 ants actually want to challenge the might of the heavens? The blood-red unicorn sneered, and the aura that surged out of its body became even more intense. However, its tone was still filled with ridicule and disdain. It could be seen that these 3 powerful beings whose strength had dropped to the level of great beings of the quasi-desolation era were indeed not in its eyes at all. It could kill them with a raise of its hand. As its words fell, the blood-red unicorn seemed to feel a little bored. It was enough to play around with these ants. If it was too entangled with them, it would instead seem that it was degrading itself. It already felt bored and was ready to make a move. Chapter 39:15. Clang, with the sound of chains, the 5th rune chain quickly lit up and spread from the other end of the void to the netherworld cauldron at a very fast speed. Seeing this scene, the scarlet unicorn frowned and sneered. The 9-headed blood dragon, the azure sky rock, and the 2-headed battle lion were extremely excited. This was exactly what they had been hoping for. They didn't expect that it would really come true. The scarlet unicorn was too arrogant, but it didn't matter. As long as another powerful existence from the primordial era came, when the 2 tigers fought, the battle strength of the 3 quasi-primordial era powerhouses would become a rare commodity worth hoarding. No matter which side they sided with, they would be able to survive. Existences at this level basically wouldn't go back on their words. They had their own pride. Moo! A high-pitched roar was heard. Then, from the rune chain that suddenly lit up, an iron-spiked devil rhinoceros with a body of 10,000 feet long rushed out. Its whole body was greenish-black, and its skin was coarse and rough. This was obviously an energy doppelganger. Its cultivation strength was also at the quasi-primordial era powerhouse level. Obviously, its original body had just recovered to the early primordial era powerhouse level like the 9-headed blood dragon, the azure sky rock, and the 2-headed battle lion. After probing the opponent's cultivation realm, the 9-headed blood dragon and the others couldn't help but feel nervous again. A feeling of disappointment spontaneously arose. After all, it wasn't a real primordial era powerhouse who came. But in general, it was better than nothing. At least this iron-spiked devil rhinoceros was known for its resistance even in the distant primordial era. Although this was only an energy doppelganger and not its original body, its attributes were the same. If there were only 3 quasi-primordial era powerhouses before, they basically couldn't escape the fate of being killed one by one in the face of the scarlet unicorn. But now, with this iron-spiked devil rhinoceros, the 4 quasi-primordial era powerhouses didn't dare to say that they could win against the scarlet unicorn, but at least their chances of survival suddenly increased by a lot. Not to mention that there were still 4 rune chains left, and another being from the primordial era might descend at any moment. Even if it was still an almighty figure from the quasi-primordial era, under the situation of 5 against 1, they would at least possess the qualifications to fight against the blood Chelan. But before that, they had to draw this iron-spiked devil rhino to their side. The 9-headed blood dragon, the cyan rock, and the two-headed battle lion exchanged glances and looked at the iron-spiked devil rhinoceros at the same time. They nodded slightly as a sign of goodwill. Then, they looked at the scarlet unicorn and sneered. "Unicorn, do you still insist? Just now, it was only divided into 4 portions. Now, it has become 5 portions. If we continue to persist, it is extremely likely that the product in the netherworld furnace will be divided into 9 portions. The more cultivators from the primordial era descend, the safer we will be. At least for now, you won't be able to kill us easily. Or you can still try and see if you can kill the 3 of us and this fellow cultivator from the iron-spiked devil rhino without suffering any damage." These words were a deliberate guide. They casually drew the iron-spiked devil rhino that had just descended to their side. Moreover, they expressed their attitude at the beginning that the iron-spiked devil rhino was qualified to have a share of the spoils. The latter had originally come for this, so he naturally paid the most attention to this point. "I have to say, in a 1 versus 4 situation, you can indeed hold on for a while," the scarlet unicorn still sneered, but the expression on his face gradually became strange. His tone also became a little strange. Unfortunately, this iron-spiked devil rhino came at the wrong time. He is destined to die innocently. "I'm afraid your plan will be in vain, roar." This was obviously a blatant contempt and humiliation. The iron-spiked devil rhino had just descended and had not figured out the situation, but it was actually issued a death notice. Moreover, the other party's tone was so firm that it did not take it seriously at all. The iron-spiked devil rhino was furious and immediately raised its head and roared. Pfft! Before he could finish his furious roar, a muffled puffing sound rang out. The iron-spiked devil rhinoceros's head that was raised high up in the air was actually separated from its body and flew high into the air. However, there was no blood sputtering out of its neck because this was originally an energy body. Its head was bitten off, and it was severely injured. It was only destroyed. It was just that its body dissipated. In the next moment, before the iron-spiked devil rhino's energy clone completely dissipated, a slender figure appeared behind it. This was the 9 demon crocodile that had followed the rune chain with the scarlet unicorn when the first accident happened in the furnace. This 9 demon crocodile naturally descended in the form of an energy clone, but its cultivation strength was the same as the scarlet unicorn, at the early stage of the desolate era. The reason why it could appear silently, and even the rune chain did not light up, and there was no rustling sound, was because it had some kind of bloodline of the 9 demon crocodile. It was related to the divine ability. In fact, it descended almost at the same time as the iron-spiked devil rhino whose clone had been destroyed, but its figure did not appear. However, the scarlet unicorn, as an ancient mighty figure of the same level as him, sensed a trace of its aura. Otherwise, it would not have said those words and made such a judgment with such certainty. The iron-spiked devil rhino's fate of death. All of this, the weaker 9-headed blood flood dragon, the azure sky rock, and the 2-headed war lion were completely unaware of it. At this moment, the iron-spiked devil rhino's energy clone had completely dissipated, and the 9 demon crocodile, who was only about 10,000 feet tall, was also staring at them coldly. When he realized it, a chill immediately appeared on his back. Anyone could see that the scarlet unicorn and the 9 demon crocodile were clearly on the same side. Right now, the iron-spiked devil rhino was already dead. It had just descended, and before it could figure out the situation, its energy clone was beheaded, and then it disappeared with a bang. The 9-headed blood flood dragon side only had 3 existences of the quasi-desolation level, but the other side had 2 real mighty figures of the desolate era. The balance of the battle strength was too tilted. There was no possibility of fighting back, and there was no chance for them to even struggle. Once the battle started, the only result was that they would be killed instantly. But the difference was not too big. The situation deteriorated rapidly. The 9-headed blood flood dragon, the azure sky rock, and the 2-headed war lion's hearts sank to the bottom in an instant. While they were secretly complaining, they looked at the last 3 rune chains as if they were asking for help. Even if this energy doppelganger was killed like the iron-spiked devil rhinoceros, they would not truly die. After all, it was only an energy doppelganger and not their true bodies. Chapter 39:16. Ever since the nine-headed blood dragon descended upon this place following the rune chains, the leading role of this star field, the source of all evil, had silently changed. Including the 8 undying old monsters, close to 200 high-level ancestors from various races and powers had rushed over from the 3 major dimensions. They were originally fighting to the death here, tossing and turning about happily. But now, all of them had retreated tens of millions of kilometers away, giving up the leading role in this star field. They were reduced to supporting characters. No, actually, they couldn't even be considered as supporting characters or spectators. At most, they were just bystanders. This was truly a little embarrassing. The group of high-level ancestors were all embarrassed, but they were unwilling to leave. On one hand, it seemed that the edge of the netherworld cauldron in front of them was gradually getting into a conflict. Before the final outcome was decided, they might still have a chance. On the other hand, a battle of this level was also a kind of opportunity for them. Even if they could only observe from a distance, it was still beneficial for them to comprehend their realms and powers. However, as the saying goes, when the immortals fight, the immortals suffer. Today, the people who were about to break out into conflict were all existences at the quasi-desolation level and above. If a great battle really broke out, no one knew what kind of scene it would be. Therefore, the group of high-level ancestors from various races and powers all tried their best to stay as far away as possible, retreating tens of millions of kilometers into the distant void space. Only the 2 remaining half-step universe-level ferocious beasts were still as before, engrossed in chewing on the rune chains. In addition, Yi Xian, who was protected by the mysterious power of the headless infant corpse, had restrained his figure and aura. At this moment, he had also approached the 2 ferocious beasts. His eyes flickered as he seriously sized up these 2 powerful ferocious beasts. The rune chains of the netherworld cauldron were naturally extraordinary, but now, they had been bombarded and collapsed. The connection with the netherworld cauldron had been cut off, and the order field within the rune chains had fallen into chaos, possibly even dissipating. It could be said that its power had been greatly weakened. And the strength of these 2 ferocious beasts was already extraordinary, reaching half-step universe level. Moreover, their teeth were obviously made of special materials. Therefore, the speed at which they chewed on these rune chains could be said to be so fast that it made one's hair stand on end. In a short period of time, only a little over 1,000 talisman marking chains remained from the original 10,000 plus talisman marking chains that had been blasted apart, and the rest had been completely eaten clean. Of course, the ferocious mechanical beasts had also paid a heavy price for this. They originally had 4 ferocious mechanical beasts, but now only 2 were left. Judging from the current situation, if nothing unexpected happened, the last 1,000 plus rune chains should be eaten clean by the 2 half-step universe-level mechanical ferocious beasts very soon. After that, they ought to retreat immediately because the sole objective of these 4 mechanical ferocious beasts upon arriving at the root of all evil was to gnaw on the talisman marking chains. This was something that had long since been proven through their actions. This was obviously very strange. Even Yi Xian felt a little suspicious. The metal used to create these rune chains must be extremely special. It must be a top-notch material. There was no doubt about this. However, if it was just this, it was obviously not enough to make DE of the Tianji clan or D heir of the automaton clan send out 4 half-step universe-level automaton ferocious beasts and risk their lives. They rushed to the root of all evil star field in order to nibble away at the root of all evil. Yi Xian observed closely and quickly discovered that when the 2 half-step universe-level automaton ferocious beasts were gnawing on the talisman marking chains, the talisman markings on the chains did not shatter along with the fragments of the chains. Every single talisman markings appeared when the chains were chewed into pieces by the sharp teeth of the automaton ferocious beasts. They all disappeared. Every single talisman marking chain was very long, and all sorts of cryptic talisman markings with completely unknown meanings were engraved on the links of the chains. When these 10,000 chains were added together, the total amount of these mysterious talisman markings of various shapes and forms would be a terrifying number, Yi Xian understood. If nothing unexpected happened, the true objective of these few half-step universe-level automaton ferocious beasts should not be the metal used to create the talisman marking chains, but the countless mysterious talisman markings that were engraved on the chains. The netherworld furnace void refining array was the work of the Green Eye of the Heavens Tao. It was personally created by the Green Eye of the Heavens Tao, including these talisman marking chains. Just from this point alone, the level of the countless talisman markings on the talisman marking chains was definitely not simple. The Tianji clan or the Automaton clan were coveting these talisman markings. Perhaps they did not understand the profound meaning behind each of these talisman markings, but it was also because of this that they were so concerned about them. Today, they had sent these 4 half-step universe-level automaton ferocious beasts to nibble on the talisman marking chains. On the surface, it seemed that they wanted to obtain this top-grade mysterious metal. However, this was merely a side benefit. The true goal was these countless mysterious talisman markings that came from the hands of the Green Eye of the Heavens Tao. They might represent some kind of unknown and powerful force. And the reason why the headless infant corpse reminded Yi Xian to come to the root of all evil star field at this time, if there were no accidents, its goal should also be the countless talisman markings on the chains. After fully comprehending this point, Yi Xian sank into deep thought. He felt extremely troubled. He didn't have any automaton beasts. He couldn't use this method of nibbling on the chains to obtain the countless mysterious talisman markings on the chains. In reality, even if there were, it was already too late. Of the 10,000 plus broken rune chains, most of them had already been gnawed away. Only a little over 1,000 remained. Furthermore, with the speed of these 2 half-step universe-level mechanical ferocious beasts, even the last 1,000 plus rune chains would be gnawed away very soon. They would be completely eaten. The only way was to directly steal them. However, if he did that, Yi Xian would definitely be exposed. What's more, if he used force to steal them, Yi Xian himself didn't have the ability to do so. These 2 surviving automaton beasts were both Sector Lord level 9 perfect. No matter how heaven-defying Yi Xian's methods were, he still hadn't matured. The current him, how could he deal with these half-step universe-level supreme beings? Screech. At this time, just as Yi Xian was feeling helpless, in the distance near the netherworld furnace, a monstrous screech suddenly sounded. Turning around, the bloodline ancestor from the second universe's blood dragon clan, the 9-headed blood dragon, suddenly exploded with a shocking aura. This was clearly a prelude to a battle. He was preparing to fight with his life on the line. An incomparably powerful pressure spread out, instantly causing the automaton beast that was slightly closer to the 9-headed blood dragon to suffer. The mysterious energy barrier that originally enveloped its enormous body suddenly dimmed at a corner. The 9-headed blood dragon's terrifying pressure took advantage of this gap and instantly entered, causing half of the automaton beast's body to explode. Its body rapidly fell into the depths of the void below. Yi Xian's eyes flashed. His chance had come. Chapter 39:17. Xiao, the sound of something breaking through the air rang out. The huge alloy body of the ferocious mechanical beast plummeted rapidly toward the bottom of the void like a meteor. The energy shield that surged out from its body was obviously quite extraordinary. After all, the ferocious mechanical beast was a half-step universe-level existence. An attack that could force it to use its energy shield to defend itself naturally could not be an ordinary power. From this perspective, one could analyze this kind of energy shield. The grade of the shield was very high. Even the terrifying pressure that suddenly erupted from the body of the 9-headed blood dragon of the quasi-desolation era only caused a temporary problem with the energy shield in the ferocious mechanical beast's body. However, at this moment, that corner of the energy shield that had suddenly dimmed had fully recovered. Therefore, the remnants of the ferocious mechanical beast's body did not suffer any subsequent attacks or damage. However, even so, its huge body still plummeted rapidly toward the bottom of the void uncontrollably. This could only mean one thing. Although its alloy body was saved, the electronic consciousness in this alloy body had suffered extremely serious damage in that instant just now. It could not even control its body. This was definitely the rhythm of the electronic consciousness on the verge of extinction. It was the same principle as when the soul consciousness of a flesh and blood life form was severely damaged. For Yi Xian, this was simply a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. He had an electronic body, and its body was a shell of Di Yi's body. What entered that shell was Yi Xian's combination of the electronic consciousnesses of Baofeng Sha, Emperor Xiaofeng, and the other Tianji clan juniors. After that, he added a wisp of his own spiritual sense origin. After a perfect combination, he created a complete set of electronic consciousnesses. A new electronic consciousness. This electronic consciousness was actually an electronic life form that belonged exclusively to Yi Xian. Now, Yi Xian had already activated it and retreated from the shell of Di Yi's body. It could shoot out at any time and enter the body of the ferocious mechanical beast below to carry out an electronic invasion. It was equivalent to a flesh and blood life form. Possession. However, even if this ferocious mechanical beast was severely injured and waiting to die, it was still a half-step universe-level existence after all. Yi Xian's electronic body only had the strength of a universe level 1. Even if he took advantage of this opportunity to enter, he might not be able to successfully devour the other party. Instead, it was more likely that he would fall and be swallowed by the other party instead. It was also at this moment that the zombie lantern tattoo on Yi Xian's left chest suddenly heated up. A wisp of energy was transmitted out and entered Yi Xian's electronic doppelganger. The so-called electronic doppelganger was actually a unique stream of data with a life of its own. When it existed independently, it was in the form of a small cluster of white light. Now, after the mysterious power separated from the headless baby corpse poured in, the original white light ball had a slight hint of green. Yi Xian understood in his heart. Without hesitation, he shook his hand and shot it out, heading straight for the rapidly falling mechanical beast below. With the mysterious energy protection of the headless infant corpse, not only could Yi Xian's electronic doppelganger easily pass through the energy shield on the surface of the mechanical beast and enter its body, it could also ensure that no accidents would occur during the process of devouring and seizing the body. Moreover, when this weak cluster of light shot out, it would not be noticed by anyone. Just like Yi Xian right now, his entire body and all of his aura were perfectly concealed. In fact, even without the protection of the headless infant corpse, this tiny light that could be said to be as small as a firefly's glow would not attract anyone's attention. The attention of the 100 or so high-ranking ancestors of the various clans in the distance above the void was all focused on the vicinity of the netherworld furnace. As for the terrifying existences like the 9-headed blood dragon, they obviously had no interest in paying attention to the ants in the surrounding area. Whoosh! In less than half an instant, Yi Xian's electronic doppelganger entered the layer of energy shield on the surface of the mechanical beast and directly entered its body. Then, it immediately began to infiltrate and devour on the electronic level. For an electronic life form, this was seizing the body. Once the seizing was successful, the original electronic consciousness of the mechanical beast would completely disappear. All of the data in this electronic consciousness, which was also its memories, would be perfectly and completely copied. To put it simply, the electronic consciousness inside the mechanical beast would henceforth be replaced by Yi Xian's electronic doppelganger. Moreover, no flaws could be found. Of course, if the clan leader of the Heavenly Legacy clan, DE, or the clan leader of the Mechanical clan, DR, were to carefully investigate, they might be able to find some clues. This was originally Yi Xian's only worry. However, with the protection of the mysterious energy that the headless infant corpse had added to the light mass of the electronic consciousness, this kind of worry was obviously unnecessary. No matter how powerful DE and DR were, how could they break the headless infant corpse's technique? They were not existences on the same level at all. After 3 breaths, the mechanical beast, which had been maintaining a state of acceleration and falling down toward the void below, suddenly stopped moving. Seeing this scene, Yi Xian immediately heaved a sigh of relief. The electronic doppelganger's infiltration and seizing the body had finally succeeded. Immediately after, a familiar system notification sounded in his mind. The electronic consciousness, which had successfully seized the body, was transmitting a large amount of data that it had just swallowed. The system asked Yi Xian if he would like to receive it immediately. Yi Xian's eyes flashed, and he immediately gave an affirmative answer. Receive it immediately. All of the information will be stored in the system's database. Immediately begin data analysis and deduction. The data transmission immediately started. Yi Xian only needed to take a glance to determine the origin of this mechanical beast. Sure enough, as he had previously speculated, these 4 mechanical beasts were completely unrelated to the Heavenly Legacy clan. They were all from the Mechanical Clan and had been instructed by the clan leader of the Mechanical Clan, who was also the imperial tutor of the Immortal Dynasty, D-Heir, to come to the Star Region, the source of all evil, to nibble away at the rune chains. As for the purpose of doing so, it was also the same as Yi Xian's previous speculations. Obtaining the top-grade metal used to forge these chains was only secondary. More importantly, it was to obtain the countless mysterious runes etched on the chains. For this reason, D-Heir had clearly made meticulous preparations. Not only had the fangs of these 4 half-step universe-level mechanical ferocious beasts been forged by D-Heir using some special material, but he had also constructed 4 interconnected miniature directional teleportation arrays in their bodies. In other words, although 2 ferocious mechanical beasts had already fallen, in fact, the top-grade metal that the 2 ferocious mechanical beasts had eaten and the large number of mysterious runes obtained from them had not been lost or destroyed because of this. Chapter 39:18. The leader of the automaton tribe, D-Heir, had obviously considered the possibility of these 4 ferocious mechanical beasts being captured, so he had specifically taken precautions. In the data transmitted by the electronic doppelganger, the furthest memory that Yi Xian could trace back to was that these 4 ferocious mechanical beasts had rushed out of a wormhole-like whirlpool and appeared in a giant underground space. In the image, the imperial advisor of the Immortal Dynasty, D-Heir, stood on a high platform expressionlessly. The cultivation aura that emanated from his body was also at the sector lord level. However, Yi Xian did not believe this at all. This was because D-Heir's cultivation strength should be similar to D-Yi's. At least, the difference should not be too big. As the leader of the Tianji tribe, D-E could dominate the first universe for tens of thousands of years. How could his cultivation be weak? One had to know that in the ancestral lands of the Space Rat tribe and the Hell Ant tribe, there were all immortal-level ancestors in deep slumber, including the demons. D-E was weak, but his cultivation strength could not be lower than the immortal level. From this, one could basically infer the lower limit of D-Heir's cultivation strength. Unfortunately, in that giant underground space that was suspected to be somewhere on the immortal planet, D-Heir did not have any communication with these 4 ferocious mechanical beasts, nor did he give any verbal instructions. The image changed, and the 4 ferocious mechanical beasts had already arrived at the source of all evil through some extremely powerful teleportation formation. The Star Region, all the memories of before they had rushed out of the wormhole-like whirlpool were blank. Clearly, D-Heir had already erased them. According to Yi Xian's speculation, the other end of the wormhole-like whirlpool should be an independent small world like a secret realm or a grotto heaven. That place should be the automaton tribe's nest, or in other words, their main camp. Although D-Heir had not been an enemy of the human tribe and had even become the imperial advisor of the Immortal Dynasty in the human tribe's technological camp, Yi Xian had always been wary of D-Heir and his automaton tribe. This was because they were too mysterious and seemed to be related to Yi Xian. Although the devouring system in his body was the invention of the human tribe's technological pioneer, Xing Bo, it was spread out through D-Heir's hands. The devouring system had indeed given Yi Xian a great opportunity. Without the devouring system, he would not be who he was today. However, ever since he met the first system carrier and activated the so-called system competition mission between the two of them, Yi Xian's heart was alarmed. He had been thinking about what kind of changes the devouring system would bring to his body when it evolved to the final level. Or rather, whether this change was a good thing or a nightmare. Based on this point, it was understandable that Yi Xian was wary of D-Heir. It was a pity that both D-Heir and the machine tribe were too mysterious. No one from the machine tribe was walking around in the outside world. This was also abnormal and strange. However, it was precisely because of this that Yi Xian couldn't find an opportunity to come into contact with the mechanical race and use this opportunity to investigate the truth. And now, this opportunity had clearly arrived. His electronic doppelganger had successfully possessed a Sector Lord-level ominous beast. Yi Xian planned to let the electronic doppelganger use this new identity to return to the automaton tribe. It could be considered a form of infiltration and infiltration. If not for the protection of the mysterious energy that the headless infant corpse had added into the electronic doppelganger, Yi Xian might not have dared to do this. Since D-Air was able to erase all the memory data of these 4 ominous beasts, it was very likely that he could see that this ominous beast had been possessed. That was tantamount to putting his electronic doppelganger in danger. However, this was no longer a problem. Yi Xian was still very confident about the headless infant corpse. There was no need to doubt its level. At this moment, the electronic doppelganger had finished receiving the data transmitted, including those mysterious runes. Among the data transmitted, there was also a copy. That's right, it was only a copy. The countless runes etched on the chain directly turned into rune energy after entering the ominous beast's body as the chain was gnawed. Now, they were stored in the ominous beast's body together with the mysterious metal that had been chewed up. Originally, Yi Xian was extremely tempted by the mysterious metal and the runes that had turned into energy balls. He wanted to use his methods to take them all. However, if he did that, the ominous beast that had been possessed by his electronic doppelganger would not be able to complete the mission of infiltrating the automaton tribe's lair. If he did not report back, it would definitely arouse D-Air's suspicion. Forget it. Anyway, even if I take it now, it's only half. The other half is in another ominous beast's body. It's meaningless, muttering to himself, Yi Xian immediately made a decision. He temporarily gave up on coveting the mysterious metal and rune energy balls in the ominous beast's body. Everything was still more important for him to infiltrate the automaton tribe's lair. After all, as long as he completed this mission, if these mysterious metal and rune energy balls were really extremely important, there was also a possibility of stealing them in the future. Right at this moment, the electronic doppelganger sent another message. The other mechanical beast in the void above had already eaten up the last 1,000 or so rune chains in a short period of time. According to the program set by D-Air earlier, after completing all this, the surviving mechanical beast was left with no choice but to follow the program set by D-Air. No matter how many of them there were, they had to activate the directional teleportation array in their bodies and return immediately. Yi Xian did not hesitate and immediately gave a response. Then, somewhere in the void above, a small wormhole-like vortex appeared almost at the same time in front of the ominous beast that had been possessed by the electronic doppelganger. The 2 ominous beasts did not hesitate at all. Their bodies shook and turned into a ray of light that rushed into the vortex. Then, the 2 small wormhole vortexes instantly disappeared. In the blink of an eye, they were gone. Roar, screech, rumble. At this moment, an earth-shattering explosion suddenly came from the void above. It was accompanied by a furious roar and 2 violent howls. Yi Xian turned his head to look, and his expression could not help but change slightly. The bloody unicorn had already made its move. It was as if it was playing a game, fighting 1 against 3 at the same time. It simply raised its right forelimb and pressed down. There was no fluctuation in the void, and no energy leaked out. However, the 9-headed blood dragon, the azure sky rock, and the 2-headed battle lion that had joined forces to resist this attack were instantly met with a great disaster. The 9-headed blood dragon's 4 heads directly exploded. The azure sky rock also broke the huge wing on its right side. The 2-headed battle lion was also seriously injured. One of the 2 ferocious lion heads exploded into a cloud of blood mist in the void. This scene was too shocking. The moment an existence at the level of a primordial god attacked, it was indeed extraordinary. It made more than 100 high-level ancestors of various clans who were watching the battle from a distance in the void thousands of miles away turn pale. Their bodies were so shocked that they started trembling slightly. Ants will always be ants. You can't even withstand a casual attack from me. Chapter 39:19. Walala. Before the crimson unicorn sneer faded away, one of the 9 rune chains connected to the lower side of the outer wall of the netherworld cauldron suddenly trembled. A strong sense of crisis surged into his heart, causing his expression to change instantly. He exclaimed, "The peak of the remote antiquity era? This is impossible." The runes on the chain lit up, and a deafening clattering sound was heard. This was clearly an energy clone of a remote antiquity era creature. It was following this rune chain and was about to descend. This was nothing. The Crimson Unicorn, the 9 Demon Crocodile, and the 9-headed Blood Dragon, the Azure Sky Rock, and the 2-headed Battle Lion had all descended in this way. However, it was precisely because they had also used this method to descend that the blood-colored Chelan was incomparably clear that the existence that was swiftly rushing over from within the rattling runic chain was merely an energy avatar. The main body was unable to descend in such a manner. However, the aura that was coming from the chain was clearly that of a peak remote antiquity era creature. What did this mean? If an energy clone was already at the peak of the remote antiquity era, then the real body of this existence that was about to descend was definitely a supreme master of the remote antiquity era. At this moment, as the Crimson Unicorn's words sounded, the 9 Demon Crocodile, the 9-headed Blood Dragon, and the other 3 powerful remote antiquity era creatures finally reacted. After realizing the situation in front of them, they all exclaimed in horror, "The strength of a certain existence has already recovered to the level of a supreme master of the remote antiquity? Who is this? A living supreme master. This is too shocking. Even if the energy clone that descended today is only at the peak of the remote antiquity era, it is enough to crush everything. Stop him. We must stop him immediately. Otherwise, once he descends, we will all die. You too, are you still attacking us? If we don't work together, even if we have to risk our lives, we will stop you from breaking this rune chain. Since we are going to die, we will die together." The last sentence was roared out by the bloodline ancestor of the Second Universe's Blood Dragon clan, the 9-headed Blood Dragon. He originally thought that he, the Azure Sky Rock, and the 2-headed War Lion were definitely going to die this time. Although it was only an energy avatar, after it died, the effect on his original body was still not bad. It was bearable. Right now, they were heavily injured by the Crimson Chelan's attack. Just as they were about to be completely annihilated with another attack, such an unexpected turn of events occurred. A primordial Supreme's energy clone was about to descend upon them. To the 9-headed Blood Wyrm, Azure Rock, and twin-headed War Lion, this was absolutely a piece of extremely good news. The Crimson Unicorn and the 9 Gloom Demon Crocodile were strong, but they had not recovered to their peak state. Their original bodies were only at the middle stage of the Desolation Era, and their energy clones were even weaker, only at the early stage of the Desolation Era. It was enough to crush the 9-headed Blood Dragon and the other 2. However, if they were to face the terrifying existence that was about to descend, they were not even comparable to ants. The disparity in strength had already surpassed the disparity between them and the 9-headed Blood Dragon. After all, there was only a small difference between a grand expert of the quasi-desolate era and an early desolate era. However, there was a difference of 2 small realms between an early desolate era and a peak desolate era. If this existence whose energy clone had already reached the peak desolate era officially descended, the energy clones of the Crimson Unicorn and the 9 Gloom Demon Crocodile would definitely die. The only chance of survival was to break this rune chain and cut off the connection between it and the Netherworld Cauldron before the other party descended. In this way, the other party's energy clone would lose its coordinates. Moreover, after the chain was broken, the rune field of order would be chaotic, and it would not be able to return. It could only retreat quickly to protect itself. It was precisely because of this that the 9-headed Blood Dragon dared to force the other party to give up. Anyway, they would die. If the Crimson Unicorn and the 9 Gloom Demon Crocodile did not agree to join forces, the 3 of them could indeed buy some time by risking their lives. They could prevent the Crimson Unicorn and the 9 Gloom Demon Crocodile from breaking the rune chain. The arrival of that existence was to buy time. At that time, when the other party arrived, they would just die together. This was forcing the other party to give up, and it was an overt plot. However, the Crimson Unicorn and the 9 Gloom Demon Crocodile had no choice but to comply because this concerned their life and death. Once they agreed to join forces, with their status, it was impossible for them to go back on their words. Even if they hated the 9-headed Blood Dragon, the azure sky rock, and the two-headed war lion to the core. If they wanted to kill them, they would have to wait until the next time. Existences at this level all cherished their feathers. None of them wanted to bear the evil reputation of disgrace. Although this was extremely sullen, the Crimson Unicorn and the 9 Gloom Demon Crocodile did not hesitate at all. They immediately made a choice and responded. Roar! If you win, you can live for a few more days. The next time we meet, we will definitely kill you. Don't say any more. Attack immediately. It will be too late if you wait any longer. Screech! Amidst the furious roars, the Crimson Unicorn and the 9 Gloom Demon Crocodile attacked almost at the same time. They attacked the rune chain with all their strength that was making a loud noise. The energy was so majestic that the entire void was trembling. Even the netherworld furnace, which was as huge as a star, was shaking slightly. This was two powerful existences from the primordial era attacking with all their strength at the same time. If not for the fact that the green eye of the heavenly Tao had specially reinforced the star domain with the power of the array formation, the entire star domain would have collapsed. At this moment, the 9-headed blood dragon, the azure sky rock, and the 2-headed battle lion's hearts were all in their throats. Previously, they were almost certain to die. But now, with the Crimson Unicorn and the 9 Gloom Demon Crocodile gritting their teeth and agreeing, although they did not attack, they had a slim chance of survival. As long as this rune chain was broken, that terrifying existence would not be able to descend. Then, even if the three of them had formed an irreconcilable feud with the Crimson Unicorn and the 9 Gloom Demon Crocodile this time, and there would be many troubles in the future, at least for today, this energy clone could still be saved. But all of this was still undecided. Everything depended on whether the joint attack of the Crimson Unicorn and the 9 Gloom Demon Crocodile could break this rune chain that represented a terrifying nightmare in time. If it failed, the slim chance of survival that they had seen just now would undoubtedly be extinguished in an instant. It had to be said that life's encounters were really too emotional. At this moment, the 9-headed blood dragon, the azure sky rock, and the 2-headed battle lion felt this in their hearts. Just a moment ago, they were still eagerly hoping that a powerful existence would come along the rune chain to save them from the fire and water. But now, that person had really come, but their hearts were in their throats, and they were afraid that the other party would really descend. Such a state of mind was really King exciting. You guys are so afraid of the arrival of this venerable one. How many shameful things have you guys done? If you don't do shameful things, be careful of being struck by lightning. It was also at this moment that an unexpected voice suddenly came from the rune chain that lit up. It was filled with relaxation, ridicule, and a strong sense of pretentiousness.